turn the microphone on. Welcome. It is the appointed hour, starting earlier this afternoon at 2:30 for our council meeting. And welcome everyone, and I call this meeting to order. Note that all the councillors are in attendance, and therefore we have quorum. Now I'll ask you to join me in a moment of reflection as we begin the discussion on the business of the municipality. Thank you. Is there any disclosure of pecuniary interest around the table? Councillor Bell.
Yes, I will be declaring on item 8. Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll be declaring on item 8.2A, the purchasing of goods and service policy.
Okay, and the general
Business which has done business with municipality in the past.
Okay, thank you. I think we need a form for that. Okay. And Councillor Greenfield, similar.
Yes, Your Worship. Similar, the same agenda item, and similar to Councillor Bell, on occasion I do some work for the municipality, and that's why I am declaring at this time.
Thank you. Anything further? Okay. That will move us into announcements, and there's quite a few coming up, starting with our spring cleanup day. Sorry, I have announcements first before the closed session. You want us to go into closed session first? Okay, we'll wait, postpone those announcements until we return from closed session. Can I have a mover and a seconder to go into closed sessions? Thank you. All in favor? I just want to add that an amendment to this to add a second HR matter to this motion, if all are in agreement. It's an HR matter, and favor? Okay.
Sorry, Your Worship.
And the closed session now. Just carried. We'll go into the kitchen. In attendance will be Good afternoon, everyone. We are now back in open session, and it is just outlined that we had gone into closed session with the clerk and acting CAO in attendance to discuss labor relations or employee negotiations, specifically an HR matter, and there was an amendment to add a second HR matter, and those items were what was discussed in camera. So now we are back into open session, and we will move into public participation. Announcements first, sorry. Yes, of course. I was going to try and do it first before we got into closed session. So we'll go around the table. Does anyone have announcements to add? I know, Shirley, you do. And okay. You want to start off, Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Your Worship, and happy to begin. We have spoken about these two before, but just reminders that this Saturday, May the 4th, it will be Baggy's second annual municipal-wide spring cleanup, as well as the Memorial Park cleanup, which was postponed last Saturday to this week because of inclement weather. So anyone interested in wishing to help clean up Memorial Park is invited to meet at the entrance to the park at 10 a.m. And in the municipal-wide cleanup, folks will be cleaning up in Bognor and Annan and Leith, and any folks locally are invited to meet at the Harbour Pavilion, again at 10 a.m. And we're inviting everyone to come back to the pavilion around noon. The Rotary Club will be providing hot dogs, and yours truly will be providing dilly bars from Dairy Queen, and there will be a draw for prizes. And we thank the municipality for their donations, as well as Knights, PharmaSave, and Dairy Queen. Second announcement is a reminder about the upcoming Golden Heirs 50th anniversary concert, which will take place on Sunday, May the 5th at 2 p.m. at Meaford Hall. There will be 2 Golden Heirs original members singing with the choir, as well as all of the alumni. And any proceeds from that will be donated to school music programs. And just one more with your indulgence, Your Worship. The Chamber of Commerce is hosting a meeting on May the 6th at 6 p.m. at Over the Moon Restaurant. And they're looking for thoughts and ideas for their plan to help promote business during the upcoming construction with the bridge on Sykes Street. So if anyone has any ideas to help our businesses through that difficult time frame, come on out on May the 6th at 6 o'clock to Over the Moon. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Just to add to the spring cleanup days, it's a very, very busy day. Saturday, May the 4th, 10 a.m. Beautiful Joe Park cleanup will also be underway. And again, 10 o'clock start. So pick your spot, and there'll be gloves and bags will be provided for cleanup. And hopefully at the end of the day, we'll have a sparkling clean municipality. We have a zoning bylaw public meeting Monday, May the 13th at 6 p.m. at the council chambers here. We're updating our zoning bylaw and looking for public input. This amending bylaw proposes a range of changes, which includes updated rules for cannabis production and processing based on the federal and provincial legislations that came into effect in 2018. Also extending permission for home occupation and custom workshop uses to occur in detached accessory buildings on lots outside of the urban area. So that's 6 p.m. on May the 13th here. Just wanted to mention that also on May the 5th is the Meaford Hike for Hospice, beginning at the Harbour Pavilion at 1 p.m. in the afternoon. You can register online for this. It's through graybrucehospice.com. There are 91 locations throughout Grey Bruce that are participating in this event this day. And for further information, I would ask you to contact Ann Patterson, 519-370-7239. I've missed some points of interest on the updating the zoning bylaw. So we would be looking at clarifying how a home occupation or custom workshop could be carried out in a multi-unit residential dwelling, or establishing municipal zoning for lands in Woodford being a minor urban center per the Niagara Escarpment Plan, providing exemption from provincial minimum distance separations, calculations for dwellings proposed on existing small lots, and also looking for some input on correction of outdated or inaccurate zoning on several parcels, and a clarification of the wording of several definitions and general provisions. So for more information, please check out the website, meaford.ca/zoning. We have a beef dinner and silent auction sponsored by the Agricultural Society on Saturday, May the 25th, 5 p.m. to 9 p.m. at the Meaford and St. Vincent Arena. So there'll be 2 sittings, one at 5 and one at 6:30. A silent auction is open from 4:30 to 7:30. Cost is $20 for adults and $10 for 6 to 11. Under 5 are free. There's also notice come forward for a low-cost spay or neuter clinic Saturday, May the 25th at 81 Stewart Street. This past Saturday, April the 27th, the Municipality of Meaford was teaming up again with the Georgian Triangle Humane Society for a low-cost spay-neuter clinic for cats and dogs. And so they're going to be doing it again on Saturday, May the 25th. Again, for more information, you can call 705-445-5204, extension 223. The rehabilitation of Shields Bridge on the first concession between the Gerald Short Parkway and Side Road 7 is set to begin on May the 6th. This past week, bird netting was installed, and the contractor, W.G. Kelly, will be moving onto the site on May the 6th and will be erecting traffic control and detour signs for the full closure of the bridge. Closure of the bridge is expected to occur on May the 8th, and the bridge will remain closed until the completion of the work, which is expected by August the 31st. And that brings us to the Sykes Street Bridge closure. It is going to be starting this week as well. Expect to see activity near the bridge as the contractor arrives on site. There may well be some minor travel delays this week as the contractor moves equipment onto the site. And they will maybe using some of the parking in the new library area during this time. But starting May the 6th, Sykes Street will be reduced to a single lane at the bridge while work is being performed. Rehabilitation of the bridge is expected to be completed by September. And just wanted to further let you know that Berry Street will be closing at Sykes Street for the duration of the project, but access to Berry Street can still be made from Cook Street. So we really appreciate everyone's patience while these bridge projects are completed, and we move on through the summer. Very, very busy summer. Anything further from council? Okay, seeing none, we will move into our presentations. First up, we welcome again Inspector Murray for our policing update of Q1 for 2019. Welcome, Inspector.
Thank you very much. Always good to be here. I want to thank you for the opportunity to discuss what was going on. Overarching, again, we had a nice quiet period. This covers January and February, first 2 months. There's no significant spikes. There's a drop in a couple of things that I'll cover off on. But I'll go through my report and take questions either as we go or at the end. As we start to move along here, we've switched to, well, everyone has switched to an integration with the court system to track charges. And it's an integration of two systems. That's why during this time frame, the statistics are inaccurate. As you'll notice in traffic-related charges, bunch of zeros. Simply not the case. It's just that the two systems are fighting each other in order to talk and how they put together. Our intention is to have a corrected document when those corrected statistics come forward. That's why you'll see that traffic offenses are down significantly. Seatbelt impaired, distracted driving for the impaired.
Excuse me, Inspector, we don't have a copy of those stats. So perhaps when you get those in order, maybe you'd forward them on to us.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. My apologies. I thought they were included in that.
Normally they are, but we didn't get them.
You didn't get them this time? Okay, thank you for that. I'll make sure you get it.
Going over the calls for service then. So basically we've had statistically, the two computers are still working out how they talk, and they integrate back from MAG into the Solicitor General. So that's how those two pieces are going. We used to, the old system was essentially a hand check and balance, and we've moved away from that for the obvious efficiencies of that. But it's taken a little while for us to catch up. So I note that domestic disturbances in January, there were 7 incidences where last year there was 10. So we had a little drop in that, which is great. Always indicating of the circumstances of the community, domestic disturbance being down. I do note that suspicious vehicles are up. I always look at suspicious vehicles, a call for a suspicious vehicle, as a very good thing from an engaged community. I watch that as a community that's paying attention, that a car is suspicious enough for them to call the police. So those are very positive signs that we see there. We have noted again in the other sort of violent criminal codes incidences, we've had some rise in some criminal harassments and utter threats. So those seem to be the main categories. That and again, we've had a rise in some assault level ones, which is your lowest level assault. So those are our calls for that. That seem to be the big indicators here. The fail to comply, and we look into our bail conditions. They are on the rise. They're up 2 incidences over the month, and that is directly attributable to our crime abatement program, where we're actually going and checking on street enforcement of judicial releases. So it allows us to check on those. We have seen, and in that operational category, you've seen a drop in our mental health calls, drop in our attempted suicides, which are all very positive things, and an overall significant drop from 35 incidents from 53 the year before. So in those areas we've had a great drop in that, and those are the type of social concerns that we pay attention to, and the underlying, and it's great that those particularly the mental health calls are down. We are seeing still 911 hangups and 911 pocket dials and drop calls. Those still those are overall on the rise, but they seem to that they're still unnecessary. They're 12 incidents of that down as opposed to 8 the year before. So that sort of covers off where we are in January. We've seen the status quo in February with our violent criminal code calls. They all seem to be the same. Indecent and harassing communications were the only ones that had a rise. So we've had some inappropriate use of communications, and we've had a couple of those incidents from there. One thing is interestingly that we haven't seen significant here was a rise in our property crimes across, because I get the view of the county. There are, in particular, our neighboring county, it has had a significant property crime rise. We have not seen that here. In particular, theft of pickup trucks seem to be on the rise, and we haven't seen that here, and we've actually saw a significant decrease of almost 50% in our calls for service in those particular areas, which again flows out of our street crime enforcement branch. Again, mental health calls seem to be quite status quo, which again is good, and it shows that there's good community support in there. We have seen a rise in domestics in February, where it was not so in January. And again, we have had 6 incidents where people called in suspicious vehicles, suspicious persons actually within the municipality. Again, goes to the switched on nature of your community, that they're noticing that things are not right and they're calling in, which is great. We did have again suspicious vehicles match that as well. We did see it seems consistent that we have 911 hangups, 911 pocket dials, and 911 drop cell calls. Another of 11 incidents of that where there were 5. the year before. So there were a total of 40 accidents during that time period. 17 were weather related. 7 were directly result of animals, and nice to report there's only 5 that had non-fatal injuries in them. So those are some very positive things. Subject to anyone's questions, that's my report.
Thanks so much for your report, Councillor Bartley.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, Inspector Murray. I ran into this last night. 911 calls. I was told that if I had 0 service on my phone, I could still do a 911 call. Is that true?
That's my understanding. They make an emergency call. How it works, I don't know.
Well, that was
Yeah.
my next question.
Sorry, that's not my area of expertise, but I do see that what I also do see is that a phone will always generate to 911, and I can't answer that, and it's a very good question, but I can find out.
I was arguing the fact last night, and it had something to do with a community place. So I just don't understand that. If there's 0 service, how does a 911 go through?
I'm not sure.
Okay, but it does.
That's my understanding. It does, yes.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Or Deputy Mayor?
You shouldn't bet without calling me.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you for your presentation, Inspector Murray. A couple of questions, if I may, just because we didn't have the report, and I don't think you touched on them this time. Drug-related calls, where are we at, and how many hours of ride checks and foot patrols this quarter?
Sorry, my pages were out of order. I can get that for you. We had, there were a total of 3 hours in January and in February. Foot patrol was 9 hours and 3/4. We had no arrest by drugs during that time frame, and we had a total of 20.5 auxiliary hours. And drug offenses, there were 2 that were brought up during this period of this report. Okay. Just let me know if you need me to be more specific on what you're asking, and I'm happy to if I didn't get specific enough.
Councillor Greenfield.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Inspector. I'm going to ask you to look into the future a little bit. And our provincial government's talking about more and easier access to beer and alcohol. And they're also talking about an acceptance for tailgate parties. I'm kind of worried about those 2 ventures. I know this hasn't happened yet, but what are your thoughts?
Well, we look at marijuana as the same as alcohol. It's a legal commodity, and now the rules around it are being sort of structured. So we'll respond as appropriate. My understanding from the tailgate portion, it still required a permit. So you couldn't just drive up to the park and it's open season. It requires you to get a permit to have the authority to do that. So it's not quite the wild, wild west when it comes to that. But it is concerning on multiple fronts. First of all, the abuse of alcohol, but also from the municipality standpoint, I'm sure the cleanup, the liability, all of that goes with the use of those parks. And I think that would flow under a permit that would be assessed. And we would respond as necessary and enforce the rules.
Deputy Mayor?
Your Worship, thank you. Inspector Murray, I wonder if I could further ask about the number of drug calls. You said there were 2, and I guess this area concerns me a lot because I employ young people.
Yep.
And recognize that drugs are prevalent in our municipality. I'm wondering, are you approaching that mostly through the school with your school liaison officer and that type of public education? How are you reaching out to kids about the dangers?
Again, we utilize our high school resource officer. So that officer is in the schools, and he actually was involved in an incident at the high school in which drugs were seized. So one of those calls was actually at the high school where the officer that was in the school responded to and seized drugs. So two fronts we're approaching that on. The school resource officer is about engagement and understanding and speaking with young people before there's a problem, but also seeing the result of when there is a problem. That fully functioning police officer will do police officer work when necessary relating to that. So that's one of the first times that the high school resource officer has been there when that has occurred. So one of the incidents was that. So we're two-pronged on that.
And if I may ask your worship, how often is that liaison officer in our high school?
It's rotating through. That officer is I don't want to open this all up again, but he is part of Grey County staff that I deploy through the high school. It's over and above what the municipality is asked for where they want their policing to go. I provide that because it's quite simply the right thing to do. And we bide our time, or he devotes his time through that. Now with amalgamation that's happening with us and Bruce Peninsula Detachment, which happened the first, we gain an extra officer with that. So my intention is to look at that program and continue to see what's working and what's not. So I can't give you that he's in there this many days a week and that's because he's not structured like that. He's structured in other areas who have made the grant and got to utilize that officer. He's more structured under that grant and the report backs that are there. I have operational control of that officer and I decide that they continue to support the use throughout the county. Does that make sense? I know what I can tell. I can tell you it's regular. I can't tell you it's every Tuesday at this point in time, but it's a regular part of his route.
Councillor Bell?
Thanks, Madam Mayor, and thanks, Inspector. I didn't get a chance to talk to you at our first get-together for the Community Policing Advisory Committee. I hope you left that very encouraged that I think we have got a very dynamic group of people who really want to just say some things on behalf of the municipality, and thank you for your comments at that meeting, and I hope you look forward to having more of the same whenever we have those meetings.
I cannot express this more sincerely. I think you have an engaged committee that's going to tell the citizen sides of what's happening in the municipality. There are smart people who come from different walks, who have different views on things, and probably the most valuable 15 minutes was when we stood around and said at the end, I asked them, what do they want from me? Where do they see what they can impact me? What's important to them? And I said this then, and I'll say that now. It doesn't matter what Martin Murray thinks is important. It matters what the people of this municipality mean and want, and that's how I chart strategic direction, by getting that input. So kudos to the municipality for putting that together and spending the time to get the right people. And I will be at every one. And Matt can attest to this. I was on the fence a little bit about coming to every one. But after that first one, I personally will be there every one. Yeah.
We can be a prototype for others.
Yeah.
How many are there in the such committees in Grey County? Do you know? Can you tell us, or Grey Bruce?
This one's unique because it has significant civilian, non-elected persons coming ahead for all the right reasons. The other police services boards have civilian members that they add in, and they provide that. This is more. So there's nothing like this. Wyerton has a Safe Communities Committee, which is pretty similar to this, and they're also a very good committee as well. I've spent a couple of meetings with them, and they are pretty dynamic in moving things forward as well. Really unique discussions on how to use what the resources are available and how best to position them. So all are valuable like that.
My understanding, Inspector, was that this committee, the Citizens Committee, is a very, very different breed of cat from a police services board. That is, yes.
Absolutely.
So that's what you're referencing.
Yeah,
is that
absolutely. These are individuals who come from the community, who have taken the time, quite honestly, to apply, be vetted, be brought forward, and put themselves out there to put a thumbprint on their community. And anytime anybody is going to do that, they get my attention.
Thanks so much. Thank you very much for your presentation. We'll see you in 3 months.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And next on our presentations is the Council on Aging Grey Bruce. We have Dave Bradley here to give us an update. Welcome. Nice to see you again.
Thank you very much for letting us come and make this presentation. Mayor Klumpus, Deputy Mayor Keevenly, councillors, staff, ladies and gentlemen. The Council on Aging is, sure, too much technology is not good for me. It all started with a senior summit that was held in Owen Sound at the Bay Shore back in March 2014. And at that summit, we planned and interviewed many, many people to gauge their interest in starting a Grey Bruce Council on Aging. And over, we heard it's about time we do something for seniors. And there was a large delegation of seniors that attended that summit. And I want to just mention that this is not the first Council on Aging by any means. There are at least a dozen, we may be 13 in Ontario, but we are one of the very few that are in a rural area. Most of them are in Windsor, Mississauga, Hamilton, Ottawa, big municipalities. So what does a Council on Aging do for seniors? The Council on Aging brings representatives of older adults together from right across Grey and Bruce counties and gives them a platform to make their collective voices heard. The goal is to ferret out the real issues and concerns of our older adults, and along with their proposed solutions, so these concerns can be embedded in age-friendly community plans. The process would be for the counties and municipalities to look at their current strategic planning efforts through an age-friendly lens and see where and how these age-friendly concepts can be integrated. In addition to that, going through our many interviews through Grey and Bruce, we have come to the conclusion that this little booklet here, A Guide to Programs and Services for Seniors in Ontario, has hundreds of programs and services that are already available. They don't know. They absolutely don't know. And we found that our rural senior people are fiercely proud, wildly independent, and they don't ask for help until they're desperate. So they won't even look at a book like that until they're desperate, and we feel we can get that message out to them. So the strategy that we have is to facilitate the setup of community advisory committees in each of the 17 Grey Bruce municipalities. Some are called towns, some are still townships, but I call them all municipalities. And those community advisory committees will send one representative to sit on the council so that we have representation, a wide representation from every municipality. And community advisory committees. I really believe that this is the heart and soul of our organization. These are the people who directly interface with the older adults in Grey and Bruce, and they are the people who will get the input for age-friendly community plans. And with them providing one delegate to sit on the council, that will make the Council on Aging sustainable. One of the very key things I believe in is that the community advisory committees provide a two-way communication avenue between your older adult residents and your council. And it also gives the council access to a tremendous resource of knowledge, talent, and lived experience. And once again, I mentioned that part and parcel of our efforts will be to educate our older adults in what is already available to them. A wheel. This is my analogy of how this should work. If you look at that wheel and take the spokes out of it, you don't have a functional wheel. If you look at that, at the hub being the Council on Aging, the rim representing all the older adults in Grey and Bruce, I really believe the spokes and the strength of that wheel is the community advisory committees. So the more spokes you have, the stronger the wheel. Likewise, with our organization, the more community advisory committees we have, the stronger our organization. I'm going to turn it over to Wally right now, Wally Halliday, and Wally's going to talk to you about age-friendly communities and answer any questions. Thank you.
Welcome, Mr. Halliday.
Thank you, Your Worship, Deputy Mayor, Councillors. If you go to the next, yep. I'm not going to spend very much time on those. Municipalities with seniors advisory committees, Hanover, Grey Highlands, Southgate, and Owen Sound. And if you go to the next slide, you'll actually, I've got to do some updating because in Brockton now we do have somebody, we are working on that committee. Elgin Shores, we're working on it, and Northern Bruce Peninsula and Southern Bruce Peninsula, we both have representatives there now. So I've got to do some updating. You can go to the next. Excuse me. Age-friendly communities, the whole idea of that is to promote the 8 key elements of the WHO, which is the World Health Organization. So this is not new. These 8 elements are done throughout the world. That's the World Health Organization's way of doing them. The outdoor spaces and public buildings, the accessibility of it, transportation, which we've done workshops for Grey Highlands, Southgate, Elgin Shores, Brockton. I'm trying to think of all of them, but transportation and housing come up quite often, the 2 biggest problems or key issues. So of course housing, social participation, respect, social inclusion, civic participation and employment, communication and information, and community support and health services. And again, communication and information and community support services and health services. Those 2, again, are pretty intertwined again and have come up quite often. When we've done workshops for municipalities, what I do is David generally does the first part, and then I come in and I do the key elements. And what we do, we go through, and when David says this works for municipalities, it works in 2 directions, because the nice thing about it is the councils can take the seniors advisory committee, and if there's somebody come forward to council and say, you know, why don't you do this? They can say, okay, let's hand it off to a seniors advisory committee and let them take a look at it and see if that's really, I don't think it's my phone, it's off. But anyway, they can turn that, they can turn it to the seniors advisory committee and let them go back to all their seniors groups and see, is this really something that the senior citizens want? So when I go through them, I go through the workshop, I'm not looking for just the problems. Sure, we want to see what they would like to have, and I tell them, let's make a wish list. But let's take a look at what you have already that already meets a good part of these 8. And you'll find that in a lot of municipalities, you're already meeting a lot of parts of those, because there's been a lot of progress done in a lot of municipalities in the last while for them. So basically, that's what we do, and we do the workshops for that. We're going to be doing some more workshops up in northern Bruce Peninsula and southern Bruce Peninsula, again, to do some workshops up there and gather some information for the municipality on that. So, what we really look for, and what we're not looking for a committee of council. We don't need, no sense tying it down in red tape. So what we look for is we look for to create a volunteer committee, and then what we look from the municipality for is somebody to liaison with the municipality, whether it be staff, whether it be a councillor, whether whoever that they think would be a good fit. The other thing we look for is, if we're going to do workshops, is in-kind meeting areas, because David and I are volunteers. We travel at our own expense, and we certainly don't have any budget for meetings and, you know, providing coffee or donuts or anything else for these workshops or whatever. So what we look for is in-kind donations of a room or stuff like that that the municipality already has. And of course, if there's anything like maybe the odd copying or something like that of minutes when the secretary does them, if something like that. So that's kind of what we look for from the municipality. Other than that, thank you very much for allowing us to come up and make a presentation. We wanted to try and keep it brief. We know you've got a long agenda and stuff, so if there's any questions, I'm more than happy to take them. David and I are both seniors, so sometimes what he doesn't hear, I do, and what he does, I don't, he does, so.
Called sharing.
Correct.
Thanks so much for your presentation. It's great, and great to see the seniors active on their own behalf. I see you've got a number of seniors from the 55 Club,
Yes.
Plus Club behind you, consummate volunteers, all of them, and with a special interest in this, for sure. And certainly, we're very interested in moving ahead with age-friendly community, for sure. So certainly take your advice and your credentials and what you've got to offer in heart as we move ahead with that program. Councillor Bell.
Thanks, Madam Mayor, and thank you for your presentation. And Madam Mayor, just a really small tongue-in-cheek, just a little tiny one. Mr. Bradley, I didn't know that you had met my mom out on the farm, because when you said that if people are fiercely independent and don't want to receive help, I thought you were talking about my dearly beloved mom. But to the real serious comment, what is the book that you have that someone like myself talking to his mother may be able to introduce her to this literature? I'd appreciate
It's
that.
a guide to programs and services for seniors in Ontario, and I know David doesn't care if I give it.
Well, where would somebody get it?
They should be at
By
all
the way,
libraries.
a phone call will have down to the publishers, it's in the back, and
Yep.
they will have a curator arrive with a box of those on your front porch, free of charge,
Yep.
within 2 days.
Well,
Good
thanks
news.
very much.
There you
Thanks very
go.
much for that. So now a counselor like myself is going to have to go home to my mom and say we actually talked about my mother at council. Is that going to have to be it?
Yeah, but the municipality can order a box of those or whatever to have them available for anybody. They're available a lot of the
I bet you
senior
are
groups.
they in the library? Would they be?
Yes.
They go in the library, so I'm
Yes,
sure they're
they'll
in
be in the
library,
libraries.
for sure.
And they're certainly available at a lot of different places. If you ever known Sound, the Active Lifestyle Center, which is where we hold a lot of our meetings, and that's where we were organized under. That was the umbrella we were organized under in the first place. They have them up there, but you can certainly get them. They're all free, they're all paid for, they're all taxpayer dollars that already been put there, so
Make
they're
use
a
of them.
beautiful item for anybody, because there's a lot of programs in there.
Terrific. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you. Sorry for the delay in keeping you
Oh,
here,
no,
but
that's-
the information was worthwhile and very important for us all to hear. So I appreciate
That's not a
that.
problem. I want to thank you again for having us, And maybe what we'll do is we'll just maybe do a follow-up with Chris in a week or so and see, and then we'll kind of work from there and maybe work through somebody and go from there. We do have people from the 55-plus club that now attend as volunteers to our,
Behind you.
yes,
Yeah,
Mary Diane
Great.
Carroll is one of them.
yeah,
And she was actually one of the founding ones that did the steering committee too, so. And
Very
she
good.
attends our meetings, so I mean, we can work through that group or any group.
perfect.
Thank you very kindly.
Thank you
Thanks.
for attending.
Thank you.
Good luck with this. Okay. So this moves us on into public questions, and I would ask public if there's any questions coming forward. If you would please identify yourself and let us know where you're from, and know first that we have allotment of 2 minutes per question for the public. So, welcome.
My name is Brad Fletcher. I live on the area of the municipality of Meaford that's serviced by Concession A. And I have apparently only 2 minutes, but I have a number of questions. I was here in January when we discussed getting Concession A resurfaced this summer. And after that meeting, we all left quite, well, our group left quite pleased and thinking that, you know, everything was going to be great. We were going to be resurfaced this summer. The process was going to be short and sweet. And I didn't expect to have to be back here, but I am. We received a notice in the mail approximately 2 weeks ago that the tender was going out. We would probably see our road resurfaced maybe by late summer. But in the interim, it was going to be turned into gravel. And everybody that's in our community, not everybody, but everybody that I communicated with in our community was vehemently disagreeing with this, thought it was the wrong thing to do and didn't understand it. When we approached council, we were told that the decision was made, it was too late. When we left here in January, we were under the impression that we were going to be kept informed of what was going to happen, the process that was going to happen, we were going to have time to react. We didn't have time, the decision was already made. Our group's not pleased with that. We were told it was going to start on April 23rd, last Wednesday, and we were also told that the pulverization process was going to take about a week. Last Wednesday, sometime early in the morning, the crew showed up. By 4 o'clock that afternoon, the road was pulverized, resurfaced with gravel, and what we were told was going to take a week, and which I would have thought would be a quality job, took about 8 hours with 2 road graders, and I'm not sure what else. I wasn't up there when it all happened. On Thursday, we got the biggest rainstorm of the season, which was forecast, and I know of 3 people that almost went into the ditch on Thursday, myself one of them. The road was totally unsafe. It was like driving in 6 inches of slush. And by Friday morning, it was complete back to washboard, full of potholes again. And what we were led to believe was it was going to be a smooth, safe surface for the summer until the project was done. My first question is, why was it done the day before the biggest rainstorm? My second question would be, how can something that was scheduled to take a week only take 8 hours and be a quality job? And then probably the most important question is, what's going to be done to keep that smooth, safe surface for the time period that we have?
Thank you for your question, Mr. Fletcher. Certainly, it's grading the roads and doing these road jobs at this time of year is always weather dependent, and that can play havoc with everything. But if I may, just from what I can tell you, this pulverizing is part of the process. That begins the process and was done it was some urgency because of your concern about keeping the potholes on Concession A filled and maintaining that road in an appropriate manner. So there was some urgency put on that effort to create a safer and more more easily maintained surface, which was the pulverization process. That process, my understanding is that it is contracted, and so they put then the schedule and the timing on when that is to take place. So that is out of our hands at that time. Once the contract has been awarded for that specific job, then it's their job to schedule. So the week time frame would be the approximate time, that not the specific day that would happen, but within the time frame of that.
The week time frame that I was referring to was the duration of turning it into pulverization and back, or pulverizing it and turning
I'm
it
not
back
sure
into.
that was the intent of that week, but I will turn it over to staff to give us an update on that. My understanding was that was the time frame that particular job was to take place within that ballpark time frame.
I didn't bring the letter with me, but I'm pretty sure it's my interpretation of how I read it and what I remember was this process will take approximately a week.
Through your worship, as you've been talking, I've been trying to go through my documentation to find the letter as well, and I can't put my hands on it right now. I do know that everybody was made aware that it was going to occur the week of April 22nd, and sorry if it was misleading, but our understanding from staff perspective is this was never a week-long project. It was a day to a day and a half at best to go through the pulverizing, add more granular, and grade it out.
And the fact that granular adding to and resurfacing, that goes out on a regular basis, so that it keeps the potholes and the grading in a uniform consistency throughout. And I don't know that there's anything to add, staff, if you have, Mr. C.A. Rob, will you have a comment on that?
No, nothing more than that. Just with an update with regard to the rest of the project. It is out for tender. The tenders are due back a week this Thursday. We'll be coming back to council at our second meeting in May for consideration. That tender is considering whether it be full asphalt or the secondary treatment. We've got two different types of costing, so council can do that evaluation when it comes back to council.
And my understanding in the RFP that went out that this job needs to be completed by September the 1st. So the time frame and the process itself would take about 5 weeks to complete, my understanding.
Okay. I may have misunderstood the 7-day thing, and that's fine. I don't care whether it took a week or whether it took a day. What I care about is the quality of the work. I want, all of us want a good quality job, however long it takes to do. We are living with unsafe conditions now, and I don't think that's, I'm sorry, you're ultimately responsible. You can tender it out, you can contract it out, but you're ultimately responsible for the safety of our roads.
And we certainly take that responsibility extremely seriously. The contract would have specifications. That job, with all of our jobs that go out, will have specifications for the job. And the contract, awarding the contract will be based on that. So that's the standard procedure.
So what do you intend to do about the current condition of the road right now?
Well, I can tell you that with all gravel roads, they are maintained. They are regraded frequently as needed, on an as-needed basis. The potholes are attended to as needed, and that's standard procedure for all of our rural gravel roads.
Please define as needed. You're not answering my question, which is what are you going to do about the unsafe conditions of the road that you created last Thursday?
The road Rob, do you want to answer that?
I can speak to that. So the road, we have maintenance standards that we're required to adhere to, and that road will be maintained to those maintenance standards, which are provincially regulated. That's the level to which we will be looking after it on an ongoing basis. Just talked to Jeff, and who drove it today, and he says it complies with the maintenance standards today with regard to current conditions.
And those standards will be maintained.
Fine.
Okay, thank you for your time. Okay, we'll now move into council inquiries. Anything from council? Councillor Kentner?
Thank you, through your worship. I saw a report last week in the Sun-Times that giving the blended tax rate in Chatsworth, and I wondered if we have established the blended tax rate for the municipality of Meaford as of yet.
Through your worship, we have not. As I've mentioned to council on prior occasions, the tax rate bylaws will be coming forward in the month of May.
I have one more, if I may. Just,
Yes.
do we know anything about the start date for work on the Frogs Hollow side road?
Through your worship, that tender will be closing this Thursday, to which we'll then have to go through the due diligence, bring a report back to council to approve the award of the report, and then so on and so forth. So, no idea at this stage of the game, but council will have a better understanding sometime in May with that award report coming forward as well.
Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Your Worship. And just further to the discussion of Concession A construction, I'm wondering if we, as council, could move forward with the suggestion of creating a sign for the entrance to Concession A, recognizing the concerns of the residents in relation to real estate values for their properties. And I think it could just be a simple sign right at the entrance, as I say, to Concession A, just suggesting that your tax dollars are at work, or construction to be completed, later in the season, or something of that nature, so that folks know that this is just a temporary situation and it's not a lifelong gravel road.
I guess through your worship, I believe that we've done as absolutely good a job as we can from a communication standpoint, letting everybody down there know. We provided notices to everyone fronting, like actually having property on Concession A, but also all of the offshoot roads that use Concession A as well. So the Beach Association roads, those folks down in the Eagle Ridge subdivision, so on and so forth. So, I mean, everybody's very well aware of what our timeline is. The letter was forwarded on to council as well, so that you all understood the timeline process. From a real estate perspective, if somebody is trying to sell a property and is worried that the road is gravel, it's an open letter to all those residents. That resident can share that letter with their real estate agent, so that the agent can then let anybody who's interested in the property know that it's just that the road's being reconstructed. I would think that that would actually add value to the property, knowing that instead of the road being in the current state that it was, that they're going to get a new road out of it, before the end of the year. As far as signage, I would say that we don't do project signage on all of our roads. If we did it for one, for whatever reason, those reasons would probably apply on every road section that we would do, and we would need a $20,000 budget annually just to do signage. Because if we're going to do, I don't understand why Concession A would be any more or any less important than, Side Road 21 or the 6th concession or the 10th, or, the roads that we have in town that we're doing, so on and so forth. They all, Frogs Hollow, they all have the same, and we've never done signage before. We send notices out to people who are affected. If council would like to provide that direction on signage, though, and find the $20,000, I have no problem with that, but I think it should be done for all road sections, not just one-offs.
Your Worship, if I may follow up, I think considering we all had a number of emails this weekend from residents, and as I understood the concern, it's, folks going for a Sunday afternoon drive, and if they're coming out that way and they see a for sale sign and they think, they may not express interest, they may not get as far as a real estate agent if they are driving on a gravel road. Folks who are buying properties of that value are looking for better quality than a gravel road, and I don't know how many signs might be required to cover off construction this year, but I would like to suggest that council discuss a signage perhaps on this road, and I don't know whether we want to discuss Frogs Hollow or not, but I think in light of the fact that our residents out there are concerned. We've had, as I mentioned, we've had a lot of comments, and I think the issuance of one sign would go a long way, and I would like to suggest that we erect one sign for these folks.
Through you, Madam Mayor, if council wishes to give direction to staff to expend money, this needs to be a notice of motion that will be considered on the next agenda.
Thanks, Matt, for that. Yes, Councillor Greenfield.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you, I would think likely to Mr. Chapman. In the urban area of Meaford, especially the downtown, in the past, we have had some trees on sidewalks or integrated into the sidewalks. Now, some of those trees have been cut down, and whoever did the cutting did a good job. They cut them down as very low as possible, but even there is a little stump a couple inches high, and most of them are surrounded by paving bricks, which are a little bit disoriented. Do we have a schedule for fixing up these sites? They are a little difficult to get around or get over, especially from those who have accessibility problems.
Through your worship, yes, we have a plan, but it won't be until, probably the end of May or early June when we can actually get in there, and the pavers that are there right now that have kind of heaved up and whatnot will be removed. We'll dig some of the soil out, actually cut down or try and remove the remainder of the tree, fill the hole back in to make sure that everything is nice and level, and no longer will there be a trip hazard.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Thanks, Mr. Chapman. I'm wondering about the removal of the roots. Is that going to disrupt any of the concrete sidewalk? Are we going to be able to get them out with a limited amount of damage?
Through your worship, the intention will be to remove what we can by limiting the damage that's there. The problem with some of these is that the root structure has actually broken through the concrete encasement, so most likely what will happen is, we'll get rid of what root and trunk we can to make sure that we get down enough so we can put some new material in there so that everything can get smoothed out, so that then we can replace the paver stones, and the rest of it will just remain and eventually will, rot away, and then we may have to go back, 3 to 5 years from now and kind of do some minor maintenance and fill things back in if there's any settlement.
Councillor Bell?
Thanks, Madam Mayor, and this will be to Mr. Chapman also. Mr. Chapman, I don't think that over my first term on council I asked a specific question, but it's not just because our guest speaker has mentioned the grading and rain. My question is, and you know that I'm a resident on a graveled road area, many of us feel that sometimes there is no regard taken into the weather. And I'm just wondering, when the workforce is deployed, do you know within the structure of the supervisor and the foreperson, do they take into consideration the rain? Because just as an observation from my personal life experience, it does seem that a lot of times the road gets graded and it rains the next day. So I'm just looking for sort of how the programming is for when the graders are deployed.
At this time of the year, the graders are deployed whenever they practically can, irrespective of what weather might be happening in the future. Because there's only so many dry days or so much of a window where after a rain the road then dries up enough that we can actually get out there. So you're always fighting an uphill battle through until the end of May, right? And that's why, typically we put dust suppressant on in the month of June, because by that time the roads have all, frost has come out, things are drying up a bit, you're not getting rain, 2 or 3 times a week. The road bed is dried up, and then you apply the dust suppressant to keep the dust down for the rest of the summer. So, yeah, it's an uphill battle through April and May. It is this year, and it has been every year in the past. And quite often we also see this. You get into October, early November, and you're dealing with trying to keep roads maintained while there's rain one day, and then 4 days later there's a dusting of snow, and everything goes to slop, and then you got to let it dry up again before you can get back out there, and it is the situation of gravel roads.
I thank you for that. Another issue, I've used the word issue. Current returning members of council know that the number 7 bridge is a bridge which is on Side Road 30. It was completely rebuilt and opened up in 2014. And one of the things that I've noticed as we're traveling that particular area is that both ends, east and west, on the bridge entrance and exit, depending on which way you're going, excessive potholing. And generally what I have seen from the foreperson of the, is they will put out cones. If something is really extremely rough and hazardous, they would put out cones. Now, right now, at council now, today, there was nothing out there. So again, the timing of the foreperson doing the road inspection, and I know I didn't talk to you about this to, have you give some forethought, but that to me on a new bridge which is done, I'm just suggesting this afternoon, if they're unaware of that, if you could pass that word on, that would be great. Or if you are aware, because that leading in and out of that bridge it's extremely rough. Thank you.
Yeah, so just, through your worship, so to reiterate to council and anybody listening or watching, the level of service expectation based on minimum maintenance standards, which we strive to meet, not exceed, but meet, would dictate on the vast majority of our rural roads that a pothole is considered a pothole once it is bigger than a foot by a foot round and 3 inches plus deep. That's a pothole. And after that pothole actually becomes a pothole, so it's more than a foot, 3 inches deep, depending on the road classification, we have between 15 and 30 days to repair that hole once we are aware of it. So our supervisor, lead hand, staff, whoever's out there doing the road patrol, will book it. We have a system where they actually go around and all the deficiencies, whether it's road or signs or a guide rail or whatever it might be, they all get booked, and we have reports that come out, on a weekly basis, so we know what work has to be done in order to make sure that we comply with MMS. So, to the gentleman's point with regards to concession A, even, Jeff said that he went out there today, drove it, and everything complies. Even if it didn't comply, because of that road classification, the pothole still might be there for 2 weeks before we get around to fixing it, and we're still in compliance with MMS. So just because there's a pothole, it doesn't mean that, the next day or within 2 days, staff are immediately going to be out in that area repairing it. We have 400 kilometers of road to deal with. We have limited numbers of pieces of equipment, and we only have 15 staff members to do everything. So everything gets done on a cycle, and we meet MMS. But that might mean that, you have to wait for 21 days to get something done, because we have 30 days to do it, because there are other priorities that also need to be met at the same time. So if every time there was a pothole that met MMS, and council wanted it done immediately, I'm going to need 3 times more people, right? Because now what we're really expecting is a level of service that is a class 1 level of road, which is like Highway 400, right? Based on that traffic count. A lot of these roads that we're talking about are traffic counts of 50, 100, 200 cars in a day, not 40,000 cars an hour.
Councillor Vickers.
Thank you, Mayor. So the question I have about concession A is, why has it been pulverized in such a forward time frame as opposed to the road being reconstructed? Rob.
We came to council and expressed our concerns to maintain the minimum maintenance standards of that road based on the current conditions, and identified a possible cost of $20,000, basically throwaway money in trying to maintain that to the standard, and recommended to council that we would be proceeding to pulverize it now as part of the construction project.
So since it had so many potholes in it, it had to have something done with it to meet the minimum standards? No.
Well, just our ability to maintain it, the cost to maintain it, I believe was what was put forward to council.
Through your worship, yeah, the expectation was that on that road, because it was a surface treated road and a lot of the surface was breaking up, it was very kind of like a patchwork quilt, and a lot of that surface had gone. Now, it didn't have an MMS requirement because it might have only been a half an inch or an inch deep, right? So it had to get to that 3-inch threshold. But it was a rough drivable road. And the only way to really fix it to the standard of what the people in that area wanted was to spend a lot of money on cold patch and staff all the time going out there to effectively create a better level of service than just the MMS, right? Because people were concerned about the state of the road. We go out there and it was literally 3 or 4 potholes, but the road was still, from a drivability perspective, wasn't good. So the way in order to have a better drivability was to pulverize the road so that it could go back to gravel, so that it could be graded on a more regular basis versus leaving it the way it was.
Okay. You have a follow-up for that?
Yeah, and I guess it's the whole, us keeping, referring to the MNS standards all the time. And, maybe we should think about the reason why we do it, not why we have to do it. And I think it is to keep a certain amount of standard to all our roads. So to go out there with the measuring tape all the time and measure the holes and then say, nope, doesn't count yet. I'm not too sure whether that's a good rationale to have, as opposed to wanting to do a good job and keep our roads in a certain state of repair that we would be proud of. And I think that's, to always quote the MNS standards and the measuring tape and stuff, if you have to measure the pothole to see whether you should fix it or not, maybe you should just fix it somehow. And to be quoting times and dates and inches and sizes and everything, I think that's what frustrates people as much as anything. So that's the problem I have with all the way we do things. It's always with a measuring tape, and I guess I just again find it frustrating.
Thank you, Paul. Mr. Smith?
Through you, Madam Mayor. The standard for road maintenance was established through the service delivery process in 2016 or 2017 by council. If council wants to have a different standard, then council needs to request that through a notice of motion, and then staff will provide a report about how much it will cost to have a different standard. But the standard that we're operating under is a direction of council.
Through your worship, it's important to note that not only that, the minimum maintenance standard, which is what we talk about, the MMS, is a provincial requirement, which actually helps to limit the municipality's liability. So it's about maintaining that level of service, not exceeding it, because there is case law out there that if we say that our minimum level of service is on a class 5 or class 6 road is 30 days, but that, the public can find a way to prove that what we're really doing is maintaining that road every 6 or 7 days as soon as there's an issue, there's a perceived level of service that far exceeds that. So then when something happens on that road, a good lawyer is going to use the perceived level of service, not the actual level of service, in establishing his client or her client, their client's needs. So that's why we always say we strive to meet the minimum, and we meet the minimum across all of our transportation system network. Because anything far in excess of that actually puts us in a liability position as a municipality. And our insurer doesn't like that very much. That's why we pay the premiums we do versus excessively higher premiums. Now, with Concession A, we don't go out and measure each pothole and say yes or no. The issue with Concession A was, if there's a pothole there that's only 8 inches in diameter instead of kind of the 12 inches, but it's still 3 inches deep, the guys are going to throw cold patch in it. The problem with Concession A is that cold patch only works if there's actually enough of a depth to put enough material in there to then pack it down so that it actually compacts. The problem with Concession A is that the majority of the surface was kind of starting to flake off, and it was only a half an inch to an inch of depth. Well, you can't put cold patch on that, like you could, but literally within 2 hours, all that cold patch is going to be in the ditch, because there's not enough depth there to compact it enough for it to actually stay.
I just think everybody's getting tired of hearing about the MMS standards and us defending everything we do because of the MMS standards and not because it's the right thing to do. That is my point.
Last point, then Darcy, and then we're going to Mr.
So-
Councillor Kentner.
So through your worship, let's not call it MMS standard, okay, anymore. Let's call it the Municipality of Meaford standard, because that's what it is. Council in 2016 adopted the MMS as the guide for the municipality standard for road maintenance and operations. All right? So it is the Municipality of Meaford's standard. As Matt suggested, if you guys want a different standard, that's fine. We can establish whatever standard you want. But as staff, when somebody comes that's critical of the maintenance of something, what we are going to then say is, we are upholding the standard that has been approved by council. So right now, we are upholding the standard that has been approved by council.
Councillor Kentner?
I'd just like to hope that the message that Mr. Fletcher takes back to his fellow ratepayers on Concession A is that we empathize. You have been a long-suffering area there. You do know that we bumped up your road a great deal to where it was in the plan this year, and we're going to have an opportunity later, as the CAO mentioned, to be able to ensure that it is a road of the quality that measures up to the quality of the homes you've built there. And beyond that, I'm quite sure at our next meeting we'll be approving a sign that will assure visitors to the area and you people that this is only temporary, and please drive safely.
Deputy Mayor, you
Sorry, Your Worship, I have two more inquiries, if I may. One, I'm just wondering, Rob, if you could talk to us about the actual pulverization process. Just noticing when I took a drive out Concession A how different it was than when Storybook Park was pulverized. On Storybook Park, we'll all remember the big chunks of pavement that were an issue for these folks, and I didn't see any chunks at all, so I just wonder what the difference was in the process.
Through your worship, I'm not a road construction specialist, so I'm going to have to defer to others who know more about the pulverization than I do.
Through your worship, the pulverization was the same process. In fact, it was the exact same company who did Storybook Park and Concession A. I guess the difference is that, you know, where the pulverization was done week one on Storybook Park, and, you know, followed, you know, within days after of doing some reshaping and then putting the recycled asphalt product on. Whereas this process, we pulverized, we added a bit of granular to it, and it'll be, you know, people will drive on it for the next, you know, 2 to 3 months until construction starts.
Okay. And if I may, Your Worship, I'll change gears for my last council inquiry. I've been approached by a group of residents who are really anxious to meet and create a fulsome list of comments to come back with after the Memorial Park session a week and a half ago now, and we're wondering if there could be an extension for receiving those comments until perhaps the end of May.
Through your worship, we do have a deadline that we identified to try to give a deadline so we can get comments. If something comes in shortly thereafter, it's not like it won't be considered. It'll be some time before the consultant finalizes the plan, probably summer. So if it's shortly thereafter, it's not a problem that we can incorporate it. However, we don't want to delay the plan process too much because it's supposed to drive the budget for 2020 so the plan can get in front of council. So if it's a little bit after, that's fine.
Okay, so Your Worship, could we say maybe up till the 15th then, or just so I can give this group sort of a...
Through your worship, this group has already been in touch with me, and the project manager and I have already been talking to them. It's important to note that this whole timeline for this project has been designed so that the report comes to council on the last meeting before the summer break to allow another 6 weeks worth of public consultation after that report before council makes a final decision in September, just in time for the start of the budget conversation. So there is a real purpose behind all of these time limits. As I've said to this group already, they are able to do what the CEO has just talked about. They're able to come to council if they wish to, and we will provide the information to council, but we shouldn't change the deadline on this because the deadline has been set for very specific reasons.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Vickers.
Another question I've had this spring, and it's more to do with the load limits on our township roads. And again, it's about it's not so much gravel trucks wanting to use our roads on early in the season. It's more about the one-off, the electrical contractors, whether it be hydro or the private contractors. They're saying that they can't travel on our roads because their vehicles weigh too much. Is there any way that some of these people can get one-offs or like kind of a blanket sort of a get out of free jail card or whatever it is so that they can start performing these duties before June the 1st? Because, they're saying winter comes at a certain point in the winter time, and the longer they have to wait before they can get their trucks onto the roads, it just makes the time period that much shorter.
Rob, you have the answer. This is for exemptions. That's what he's referring to.
For exemptions, yeah.
Even the process they have to go about to make sure that they are legal. Like, these people don't want fines because they're on a road that they shouldn't be on. Trying to, like I said, it's not going back and forth like a dump truck or a gravel truck. It's a one-off. They drive in, do the work, then drive back out.
Yeah. I know that through the worship we've had some discussions about that, and it's something that our new manager of transportation is considering. First off and foremost, that exemptions are very difficult to minister in that regard. I know that one was given early when the frost was still in the ground for someone to do work by myself, but it is a concern in doing that, and it is currently being reviewed from a process point of view, as far as I'm aware.
Yes, for that, through your worship. So the load limit is May 15th right now, unless, of course, we were to get a whole lot of rain, but that's the standard in the bylaw that's set. It's generally May 15th. It's at the discretion of the manager of Transportation and Fleet Services that it could be pushed up as early as May 1st, which is not going to happen this year. It could also be pushed back to the end of May if we had a really bad winter or things remain wet. For forever, since we've had load limit the load limit bylaw for the spring, the municipality of Meaford has offered the ability for exemptions and exemption permits. So the individual or the company just has to contact Transportation Services and explain what it is they're attempting to do, the roads that they're going to be traveled, and if it makes sense and the roads are not in horrible condition right now, then typically the exemption is provided. That individual or business would hold that letter on that vehicle that's been, so if it's a cement truck because somebody wants to get started early on a foundation of a house, when that cement truck is rolling down those roads, they just have that letter in that truck, and so if they ever got stopped, then it clearly says that they were provided the exemption on, for this purpose at this time. So we do that all, there's not a million requests, but we do offer exemptions depending on the situation and if it's reasonable.
Particularly for water trucks or milk trucks, the delivery of specialized products that have to get to market. That has been the tradition, is to give those businesses, water haulers and milk delivery specifically, an exemption.
So they have to apply. They can get a blanket one then that they apply for once, or I'm not quite sure. What you said, Madam Mayor, is it's a little bit different than where I was going with it, but they're kind of two separate things. So can we get some clarification on what is allowed and what isn't allowed?
Certainly. So for our water haulers, we do provide a blanket exemption because, we wouldn't want to prohibit somebody from getting water if they have a dry well or something like that. Virtually for all other cases, there is no blanket. It is a one-off. The intention is that, they need this because they are making one trip or one day of a couple of trips, like, in the event of a cement truck for a foundation, and that's it. There is no blanket. We would never provide exemptions for, somebody to make 50 or 100 full load trips on a road section because, they want to haul logs out or they want to move gravel from point A to point B. This is very defined and specified that it's, a few trips here or there for a very specific reason that can be justified, and that the roads will, in the eyes of the manager of transportation services, will hold up through that traffic.
Okay, we move on. Councillor Bartley.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and I'm really sorry to beat on a dead horse. Concession A, I drove down Concession A last fall. There was 194 potholes bigger than a foot, 220 to 240 smaller than a foot, but very few, if any, were 3 inches deep. And so staff was just following what they were told. We come up with that standard. I believe that standard is wrong. A 3-inch pothole is ridiculous. I think we'll have to look at it, and we're going to have to come up with a different standard and put more money towards it. Simple as that. Because I was curious why it was so neglected, is because none of them met the standard that we give them. So we're going to have to change that. Thank you.
Okay, can we, one more?
Sorry, Your Worship, I think it's a quick one. Rob, I had a request from a caterer who was using the community center kitchen. Just wondered if we could get a compost bin for that kitchen.
We will check into that. Through Your Worship.
Okay, seeing that's completed, we'll move on to the consent agenda. Motions and bylaws for decision. First off is the consent agenda. The first one is bylaw 2019-38, bylaw to establish an economic development strategy task force. And the second one is DES 2019-19, that council directs staff to postpone the budget and infrastructure engineering design projects on William Street and Cook Street and use those funds for an infrastructure engineering design on Thompson Street and a combined infrastructure engineering on Cook Street. And the third one is the bylaw 2019-39 to adopt the 2019 operating and capital budgets for the business, Meaford Business Improvement Area. Can I have a mover and or first off, any of those that want to be pulled? A mover and a seconder then, Councillor Kentner and Councillor Barton. All in favor? And that is carried. So moving on to 8.2, the first one is bylaw 2019-40, the purchasing of goods, services, and construction policy, and we have two councillors who have declared on this. Let the record show that Councillor Bell and Councillor Greenfield have left the meeting. Can I have a mover and a seconder, please, to put that on the table? Deputy Mayor and Councillor Bartley. Oh, sorry, I didn't see your hand, Councillor. Okay, over to you, Darcy.
Yes, Your Worship, we figured this just couldn't go on consent because there is a minor modification to the original policy, actually based on council's direction of pushing the limit from $5,000 to $10,000. Everything else within the policy is effectively stayed the same. With moving from $5,000 to $10,000, we have had we put a couple caveats within the policy, though, that it's at the director's discretion up to $10,000. And the reason being is that in the past, at $2,500, effectively all of our full-time employees that had, purchasing cards and purchasing responsibility were all granted up to that $2,500. Now that it's moved up to $10,000, we put it in there, at the director's discretion because there, may be a number of staff that actually have no need to have a $10,000 limit, so they still may be limited, from purchases still at, a lower limit than that $10,000 amount.
Okay, well, questions? Councillor Bartley?
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and I do apologize, Darcy. I didn't see where you changed it to 10,000. I was going to bring that up. I probably missed it. Can you give me the page number that was changed to? Or get back to me on that, because I didn't see the change and I was inquiring about it. And in the same, oh, sorry, Matt's got a...
Through you, Madam Mayor, a little bit of confusion here at our end, I'm afraid. The policy that you've got in front of you actually has the change on page 11 of 33 of that policy.
33.
It's where the table is for the method of procurement and the number of...
Okay.
Oh, sorry. Page 10 of the document is coming up as 11 on my screen. The original request to council had said more than $5,000 and not more than $24,000 as a request for quotation, and then a direct purchase up to $5,000. Council gave approval at committee of the whole to go up to $10,000 for that direct purchase. Since the last council meeting, staff have had a number of fairly vigorous debates about how best to deal with this. And there's been some concern expressed about not having to have quotations for costs of up to $10,000, because that leaves the ability to sort of have a price for something and then not do enough due diligence to make sure that it is the best price. So what staff are actually recommending is that we say thank you but no thank you to council about the $10,000 and go back down to our original level of $2,500 for the direct purchase, and then from that, for $2,500 to $10,000, we will be implementing a series of procedures internally to make sure that staff get quotes, but it's done in a simple manner. Some of the conversation last time around was about keeping it simpler, so for both contractors and staff to try and save some time. So we're going to implement procedures that keep that simple and have a quick tracking sheet rather than having to have detailed written quotes all of the time.
Okay, because I didn't read any of that in there, so...
Yes, that was my apologies. Brady was working with the clerk's department on trying to update this and make sure that it could work from a procedures perspective, so I was ill-advised.
And you people are the ones that are asking for it, so whatever you need, you've got the authority to go up to 10. If you keep it lower, that's fine too, but we can't approve this tonight because it's not black and white to where you're going with it.
Through your worship, I think you can, because the document as it stands is the document that we intend, and as I say on page 10 it says up to $24,999, it's an open market process, and then between $2,500 and $24,999 it's the request for quotation. Within that band, we will deal with procedures as to some slightly different levels there. The most important bit of this was the change from 15,000 to 25,000 for the request for quotation rather than a tender or an RFP, because that's where the time really comes in, is if you have to develop a written document, a formal written document, put it on our bids and tenders system, send it out for 3 weeks, do evaluations and so on. That takes a real significant amount of time, and for those $15,000 to $25,000 projects, it's probably not worth it. So moving this up to 25,000 is the key part of this.
Okay, having said that, part two of my question would be, I brought it up last council meeting about no member of council being able to bid on a contract. I don't think that has been changed in this new one, or the way I read it, it hasn't been changed.
It certainly should have done, so I'm just scrolling through very rapidly.
And if I missed that, I apologize again, but I didn't get that change in this new documentation.
I apologize, it has not been changed. I believed it had been.
Page 1 of that document says, no member of council or municipal employee shall have the right to acquire goods, services. That's the same wording as in last council meeting, so I am concerned about that.
Through your worship, as there appears to be some confusion on a number of points
Thank you.
here, I'd ask
Withdraw.
that we defer it till next time.
Yeah. Okay. Yes, please. Okay, so that then is deferred. Do we want to put a date on that, the next meeting? Pardon me? We're going to defer it?
We should have a mover and a
So
seconder,
there's
yes.
Mover and a seconder to defer it. Deputy Mayor? Councillor Bartley will second that? Okay, the same thing. All in favor of deferring this motion, and that is carried. Can I have a mover and a seconder, please, to move into committee of the whole? Councillor Kentner and Deputy Mayor. All in favor? That's carried. Okay, the first one is CAO 2019-08 grant funding. Can I have a mover and a seconder, please, to put this on the table? Councillor Bartley. Councillor Vickers. Rob, over to you.
Thank you, Worship. As noted in the report, on March 20th, we received first a phone call and then a letter from the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing with regard to a one-time grant for small and rural municipalities that totaled $642,347 for the municipality of Meaford. Through that discussion with the person from the ministry, the objective or the intent of this was so that municipalities can look at refining, improving service delivery review, while at the same time indicating to staff and recognizing that we just went through an extensive service delivery review process, but highlighting that the intent of the program, although not mandated, it was to modernize service delivery review and find more efficient ways of operating. So based on that, the intent of the funding, senior staff looked at different potential ways of implementing this, and then we looked at it under the different streams or priorities of council and following under those. So under ensuring sustainability, we've identified, we have 3 approved solar projects that would require debt financing to proceed, and then the return would come back as we save on electricity. So the way staff looked at this one is if we have a grant to install the solar, then the return happens a lot sooner for us, which is expected on the 3 systems to be about $7,000 to $8,500 per year annually. If we had to pay for it, it would be, the payback would be 20 to potential 12 years. So receiving this grant to do it would assist a return and be a yearly savings on electrical costs that can be used to offset our, reduce our operating budget. The next recommended report is the development of site plan design guidelines. This is something that we've been looking at for some time. We actually had proposed it as a project back in 2010, however, weren't able to get to it. We have site plan design guidelines in place for our downtown community improvement area, but we do not have it for any commercial development in the highway commercial area or larger scale multi-residential development that would include those development standards that are identified in our official plan. As per the section of this official plan, E142 of the official plan, it notes that urban design guidelines will be developed for various urban land uses going forward. So we're following along with that. The intent there is we would have a student hired to pull those together. We would need to utilize the services of a landscape architect to develop those landscape design guidelines or the landscape elements to be used. And we'd also have to have an engineer develop those design guides for, to implement low impact development. So design elements to include it to reduce stormwater runoff and address matters of climate change. So those would be included in the site plan design guidelines that then would be used by residential multi-developers and commercial developers in integrating those features within their requirements. The next, under investing infrastructure, you heard as part of the presentation on Thursday night, it's the comprehensive traffic count survey, the bridge state of the infrastructure update. We heard a lot about looking at different types of bridge structures, so that process would look at that and in factoring the long-term plan into our bridge. So if we go with looking at all bridges repair, which I know Council's interested in doing, how could we do that with also looking at innovative bridge types? And that bridge sortie would update that. The traffic count would look at all of our road sections so that we know that we have them classified right and are doing them right. And then finally, the transportation master plan. And as Darcy spoke about on Thursday night, if you close one of these bridges, we've heard there's impacts on other roads. Well, a transportation master plan would pull that out and do that full analysis in that regard. From a planner's point of view, a transportation master plan is a necessary tool to back up our development charges study. So as we look at roads that are going to be development related, so increase in capacity of that road based on growth, a transportation master plan helps support that document going forward. To date, we've never done one with a transportation master plan backing it. Luckily, we've never been challenged on that, but with a transportation master plan, it backs it up. One of the things, moving to leading municipal government, that I've highlighted before to council as part of the consideration was, I termed it workflow management. This is identified as process mapping. And basically what it's doing is ensuring that as different processes move through the organization, that we're doing it efficiently, so, and particular for the end user, to ensure that it's timely and effective for them. And what we're recommending there is hiring some students to come in and work with staff. It has to be working with staff because we're the ones that know the process, but they can identify work, set out process mapping that identifies and reduces the number of hands that get people dealing with different things. One of the biggest examples we have is compliance letters that come in. Building gets one, water and sewer will get one. Just many people get different compliance letters on change of property, and it's to ensure that we're being effective and efficient in doing that going forward. Next is a work order management system implementation. This is something that we have in the long-term plan as part of our asset management program. We need a work order management system to be able to understand the work that's being done on our current assets. So if there's a culvert that needs replacing, it gets put into that system so we know the amount of money that's being continually spent on that particular item on a go forward. This program would allow the software implementation, which is different workflow programs, asset management, have at about $100,000, and then we'd have a junior staff member on contract to help us implement that over a small period of time. And then the last one, under the Police Services Act, we need to prepare a community safety and well-being plan going forward. We're still trying to understand how that can work in relation to the county, but we also believe that every community in Grey County is not identical. So some of the community well-being issues that you might see in Owen Sound or down in Hanover may very well be different. So there will be a certain element of the community well-being and safety plan that needs to be Meaford-centric and Meaford things. So there will be a cost to us in developing that plan, and it is a requirement for us to do that. So those are the different programs that we're putting forward as projects that follow along the lines with the Municipal Affairs and Housing suggested intent for that funding at $642,000. So we're recommending the committee either recognize those, or if council wants to have further discussions on those items or deal with them separately, it's up to council on how you want to deal with it, but that's what we put forward.
Okay, thank you for that, Rob. Questions? You want to go around the table? Yes. Councillor Bartley?
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and yes, I think we should deal with them separately, truthfully. I've got some issues on just about every one of them. Can we start at the solar installation? It is our money, even though it is a grant, it is our money now. So we're going to spend it on the solar installation. What is the life expectancy, Darcy? Do you know on these solar panels? I was told 20 years.
Through your worship, the vast majority of the panels in the market are guaranteed to perform at a minimum 80% capacity up until 20 years of age. The expected timeline, though, is that they'll continue to degrade slightly beyond that 80%, but they'll last 30, potentially up to 40 years.
Okay, I was just concerned that payback was going to be just about at life expectancy, so you weren't any further ahead.
Through your worship, that is the case right now, and that's why solar is kind of not as popular as it was a couple of years ago. But that's because the provincial government slashed the rates by 40%. I think, I'm not a fortune teller, but I believe that thinking that a 40% reduction in rates is going to be sustainable for the long term is probably not the case. So if the rates even just rebound to what they were prior to mid-2017, the payback is 12 to 14 years instead of over 20.
Okay, I was under the impression you were just spending money to save money for the same amount of time. You weren't any further ahead. So I'll ponder that if you want to go around the table. We'll come
Okay.
back.
Councillor Bell, did you have something to
Thanks,
add?
thanks, Madam Mayor. I know that my fellow councillors have read the letter from the minister, and I would just like to read a line. It's right before the minister in the letter says, "I'm pleased to share with the municipality the amount." So the little paragraph before is exactly what the Mr. Armstrong has said about modernizing the service, reducing costs, but there is a line, 2 or 3 lines up, that says that investing in projects such as service delivery reviews, development of shared service agreements, and capital investments. It says our government believes that municipalities are best positioned to understand the unique circumstances and to determine where and how this money is best spent. And to that end, Madam Mayor and fellow councillors, with everything that this council has been going through, with the massive amount of monies that are going to be required on our roads and our bridges, that we have an opportunity here with this really good amount of grant money to really, I believe, make a difference if we put that money towards roads and bridges. And inside the recommendation from our members of senior staff, which we heard out at Bogner, about tying a project together with the influence of the road systems around, the state of those bridges where they are now, doing road counts so we know what we are doing for a service level. As a generic, and I won't do a motion at this point, but just for my fellow councillors' consideration as you go around, Madam Mayor, this councillor would be inclined to want to do that bridge, road, network, doing those kinds of things to move forward on that when we've got this nice, good chunk of money, and the remainder of that money to be put in reserves for bridges. So that if I could do that as a motion at this point, but I'm truly interested to hear, Madam Mayor, my fellow councillors around the horseshoe.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Greenfield?
Thank you, Your Worship. First of all, I want to thank Mr. Armstrong and other senior staff members for bringing forward this report. I appreciate their efforts, I appreciate their work, I appreciate the time taken. However, I'm going to be very blunt about this. I guess perhaps bluntness goes along with the aging process, and certainly I am aging. Over the last 4 or 5 days, we have heard very, very clearly from many of our residents their dissatisfaction in the delivery of services in this municipality. We had between 175 and 180 people in Bogner at a meeting. That's compared to, I think, 25 to a budget meeting a few months ago at Woodford. That tells me the discussion about the twin bridges is very, very serious, very concerning. We've had, over the last few days, countless emails from the folks up in the Concession A Birches area concerning the condition of their road. We're talking about improving service delivery, and I feel it's high time we started to do that. This grant is unconditional. It's one time, $642,000. And I'm going to introduce a motion that's got nothing to do with the recommendation, and I'm not going to apologize for that because I think it's an amendment of reality. I recommend all $642,000 to be directed to the cost of the actual replacement of bridges 21 and 22 and the insurance. The concession A from Side Road 18 to the Birches will be resurfaced with asphalt. If I can get someone to second that, I will speak further on this, Your Worship.
Okay. And seconded by Councillor Kentner. That's what I said, Councillor Kentner?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Councillor Bartley? Under discussion on this motion.
We can discuss this motion before it goes through?
Process-wise, yeah. But I think maybe if we could stall till we hear, pardon? From everybody, yeah. We'll go around the table and then we'll come back to that
was my
motion.
recommendation.
Yeah.
I'd like to hear more about this stuff before I
You make
vote
a
on
motion.
that, tell you the truth.
Yeah, so that's what we'll do. We'll park your motion, Councillor Greenfield, until we've gone around the table. So, Deputy Mayor?
Your Worship, thank you, and I want to also express appreciation to staff for bringing forward these suggestions, but my support goes with the motion, with perhaps an amendment if Council will consider the addition of a $50,000 request. You will all remember a short time ago we had a presentation from June Porter, who came to us on behalf of the Northeast Grey Health Centers Board and asked us to consider funding a doctor recruiter. We well know how serious this situation is. It's a crisis, there's no doubt about it. We have 2 doctors currently who want to retire. They're anxious to do that. We have need for doctors to cover 3,000 orphan patients that we know exist in this area, and that doesn't even touch the growth. We know that for every 500 households that are built, we need 1 more doctor, and the last I heard Rob speak to growth, we have about 2,500 units in our funnel, and we don't know at this point how many persons who have moved to this municipality are still going back to their hometowns, Oakville and Newmarket and so on, to keep their own doctors. So considering nowadays that young doctors take roughly 800 to 1,200 patients at the very most, it takes 2 new doctors to replace any 1 doctor that we currently have. So that puts us in need of at least 7 or 8 doctors just to catch up. We know that at the Tunnel Blue Mountains Council meeting last week, their council did approve a motion to move forward and in a suggested partnership with the Municipality of Meaford in the hiring of a doctor recruiter. The details of this partnership are not as of yet worked out, so I would ask for Council's consideration in just setting aside $50,000 from this pot of money to to further discuss that kind of partnership with the town of Blue Mountains to move forward with the hiring of a doctor recruiter. And I know it has to be established yet exactly what that role looks like and who the person would be responsible to and so on. And those details could come back to council at a later date with the opportunity to discuss moving forward with that hire. So I would ask that we consider Councillor Greenfield's motion with the addition of that third piece. Thank you.
So is there a seconder for that amendment then? Yeah. Okay. All right, we'll deal with that. It's the First Amendment. Okay.
Yes,
Councillor Kent.
thank you, Your Worship. I too would like to thank staff for the initiative that went into this document. But as soon as I learned that, in fact, this was an unconditional grant, I had no problem determining that this should be devoted to the biggest problem we have, which is infrastructure. And if I could, being an old announcer, it's just a lot easier for me to read than to think as I talk. I am against the traffic count project for the simple reason we need accurate assessments of the use of each road, not just Monday to Friday averages. At the Warden's Forum, we heard that the statistic that only 75% of the homes in South Georgian Bay are occupied 12 months of the year. Some of our roads are experiencing a huge influx of visitors, many arriving on Saturday and departing on Sunday. And if we take no account of these vehicles in the traffic count, we certainly don't have an accurate assessment of all use of the road, and therefore we don't have an accurate assessment of its life cycle and its maintenance costs. We're making our decisions with complete disregard for the economic pillar of tourism. So that's my bit on the traffic count. On the transportation master plan, I think it's been underestimated, the cost of that more than anything else. The scope of the study is well beyond what is needed to make decisions on bridges. To know whether a bridge can be closed, the big question to answer is how many dollars worth of agricultural production it contributes to what I would call our gross municipal product. And that's not what a transportation master plan tells us. So that's my thought on that. The SOTI update project, rather than pay a consultant $50,000 for an overview of bridge construction options, wouldn't it be cheaper and equally effective to put out a request for proposals on some of the bridges that are temporarily closed or soon will be closed, making clear that we're looking for innovative approaches to the common problem of too many failing bridges and too few resources? And yeah, I think the other things are all good, but I think that we really need to devote this money to the most pressing problem we have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Vickers.
So thank you, staff, for your work. But I somehow feel you almost underestimate yourselves a little bit. A lot of this money is going towards consultants and to people to give you advice, when I think there's a lot of good advice to be had within the people we have right now. You know, to start off with the solar installation, I have a hard time investing, you know, seeing the benefit of investing much money into solar. It's a very inefficient way of generating power. The traffic count survey, you know, if there's only a few cars going down the road, what will that actually tell you? Will it tell you, give you much information that you can base your decisions on? There isn't going to be a real winner or loser in these traffic counts, and to spend, you know, up over $150,000 on that seems to me nothing more than giving a consultant somebody to give you an answer that really won't have any bearing effect. The bridge SOTI update in the transportation master plan, we have many good employees. We have you know, there's 2 or 3 project engineers. We have a new person hired to do budgets towards traffic and bridges. We have Jeff Fries, who's also knows the area, knows what needs to be done, what doesn't need to be done. I think we need to start listening to our people a certain amount, as opposed to having somebody come in, you know, whether you want to say on their white horse, coming in to tell us what should be done. And I just find that the people are tired of consultants and want to see more action. So if we do nothing more than fix a couple bridges out of this money, and you know, to say that to me is progress. That is moving the needle from point A to point B. We got something completed. If you give this money to consultants, all we'll have is some paper, I think, at the end that probably gives us answers that we probably either knew or should have known. So I do object to giving the money to consultants when I feel we have a lot of the information already within us.
Okay, so staff, I'm sure there's, who's first? Rob, are you first?
Through your worship, but great discussion around the table. Council can make a decision based on the information that we provided in the report, which I think is good. The only comment that I will have, and unfortunately it's because of what Mr. Vickers just said, which is the only thing I took exception to of all the discussion. Council continues to say that you recognize that as staff, we are hard at work and we are at capacity, and that you recognize that we are doing as good a job as we are given the pressures that we are under. I can tell all of council right now, with the projects that have been proposed in this document that have anything to do with myself or my staff, do not expect us to pick up the workload to get these things done. We are at capacity. And the only way that we are not going to be at capacity to be able to do these things is for you as council to provide direction on other projects that you want to see done, then taking a back burner. We do not have an endless supply of hours and capacity of staff. So if you expect us to do these things, something else has to give. We are done as staff being able to continue to provide more and more and more and more. We are at the limit.
I was going, before Matt, thank you for that, but to jump into the discussion here, and everyone has acknowledged the work that staff has put together to assemble these projects. My question to staff was in precisely that. Where are we in terms of our capacity to handle some of these one-off projects that some may have been on the books for some time, Transportation Master Plan, for example. It seems to me that this needs to be taken into account totally, is that would they be done? They've been on the books, some of them, for many years, for many reasons, to provide accurate information to council, to be making the informed decisions that we must make. So my question is exactly that. How many of these could be done elsewhere or are expendable, if you will? I think from what I've heard, from what I'm understanding, the traffic count survey and the Bridge SOTI updated, combining all of the different types of constructions that might be usable and might be appropriate to repair and rehabilitation of the bridges that we have would be a good tool to have in our arsenal, I guess. And that moves into the Transportation Master Plan. I think those three really have been on the books. They've been things that are going to be very helpful in making informed decisions with regard to road rehabilitation and the management of our road system, 400 and plus kilometers in road maintenance. So I think we really do need to be understanding just that point exactly, is they've been delayed, they've not been able to be fitted into the current level of staff activity. Is this an opportunity to be looking specifically at, with the found money, to be getting that done sooner rather than later, to have it delayed and delayed even further? That, I guess, if there's anything else on this list that has been on the back burner for a long time that would be useful in making decisions, I think we need to hear that now.
Yeah, to your worship. I can honestly say, when we drafted this report, this is not a surprise to us. We were looking at the true intent of finding efficiencies, and that was the project we can. We know the challenges of council and as hearing with regard to the bridges and the roads. We're not surprised. but I can equivocally say that just sort of to some degree that we will not be able to do any of these projects with the current staff, or in some of the cases, it's actually, it's a capital item, not a consultant, but we looked at the solar, it's actually solar. We look at the traffic counts, it's actually counters. In the case of the which one was it? Sorry. The process, not the process mapping, but the work order system. $100,000 is the software program that integrates with our current financial system to do that. The other thing is we do not, a transportation master plan and the bridge SODI are to be done by transportation engineers, which we do not have on staff. We have managers, but it is quite common for municipalities of our size or even cities to contract those services out to a consultant to pull all of that together to do it based on the environmental assessment process. So we will not be able to do these specific things. We can investigate other types of bridge structures, but again, it's going to have to form part of an EA process to consider those bridges, and it's ultimately going to have to be an engineer that puts their stamp on whatever design is considered by council on the go forward. So just to advise council that if we're aware that you might want to put that into infrastructure for whatever processes we take with those, but these studies we won't be able to prepare them unless we bring back a budget sheet in a future year for consideration for them to be done.
Councillor Bell.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. I would like to ask Director of Legislative Services, and I hope that this ties in with our discussion well because of what Mr. Chapman said. In our councillor package, we received an update from Legislative Services of all of the things that staff are working on, which said this is active, and projected dates of when things may be done. Would it be of value from Legislative Services to bring all of those before council again and say, carry on or stop? Would that be of any benefit, and can we do that?
Through you, Madam Mayor, the Council Directions memo is a very limited set of information in that it is only items that council has directed through notices of motion. So those are the things that you as members of council have brought forward and specifically instructed us to do. Council gives us somewhere in the region of 5 to 10 directions at every council meeting, and through the service delivery review process passed somewhere in the region of 300 resolutions, individual clauses about things that staff were supposed to do. We are continuing to work through all of those processes. We are continuing to work through all the things that we have to do on a daily basis, and a weekly basis, a monthly basis, and so on, that really bluntly have nothing to do with anything council have told us to do, because that's just the things that we have to do. I can only reinforce what the Treasurer has said, is that our staff at a senior level, at a middle manager level, and at a junior level do not have the capacity to do any of these things. Some of our staff, including the people before you today, have the skills and abilities to do some of these things, but we do not have the resources available to do them. If we were to try and do these, then other things would stop. And really, there are very limited things that can stop right now, because we still have to maintain those levels of services that council has previously given us direction to do. I'm going to segue a little bit there, because I just need to have my say on this, in that as senior staff, we put together this report in the spirit of what the grant was designed to do, and we thought very, very carefully about which projects we should be promoting. I can't emphasize enough how important I believe these projects are, for many, many reasons. We've heard continuously from this council, from previous council, and from the members of the public that infrastructure is important. We understand that, we recognise that. We recognise the infrastructure funding gap probably more than anybody else, because we deal with that on a daily basis as we try and figure out budgets going forward. The projects around infrastructure that we're proposing here are designed to give us the information that we can get so that council can make better informed decisions. We've heard regularly from members of the public that the traffic counts that we've used in the preservation model are wrong. Well, the only way we can find out if they're wrong or if they're right and use that information to try and move forward with decisions about which roads should be dealt with at what time is by having that information. And using electronic counters is a way of doing that, because then we can continue to use that data. We've heard time and time again that the bridges that were scheduled for closure through the bridge SODI, which council approved the strategy, it's because we didn't consider the impact of those bridges being together. The Transportation Master Plan is to consider the impact of those bridges being together and whether closing all 5 of those bridges would have a major impact. The process mapping, the site plan guidelines, these are all things about other services that we offer. Infrastructure is important, but we offer a huge range of services, and we hear from our public all the time that we need to be better at it. The developers need better guidance on what they can and can't do in their site plans. Our public don't want to have to deal with 3 different people to get an entrance permit and a civic address. We need to do some of these things in order to be successful. Similar with the work order management system, in that we hear that people request a pothole be filled, but then they never hear anything back and they don't know whether it's happened or not. These sorts of systems are what we can put in place with the resources that we have in order to make some of that stuff happen. These projects are important to the long-running survival of this municipality and the services that we offer. I know that infrastructure is important, and I know it's a massive, massive issue for us at the moment. But if we don't deal with some of these things that, as we've said, have been on the books in many years for some of them, then we're going to come back against them time and time again, and we're going to have to bring forward reports and ask for more money, and we already know that the budgets in future years are really problematic. So council can, of course, do whatever it wishes, and it is your role to make those tough decisions, and I've said many, many times before you that I do not want that role. But we've given this best advice because we're trying to look holistically at all of council's strategic priorities, at the resources that we have as a municipal staff, and the things that will enable us to provide better services to all of our residents.
I think one of the other things we have to take into account here too is that council has not had the final assembly, if you will, of our strategic priorities and what that looks like in terms of implementation going forward, and what are we going to be asking of staff in terms of those priorities and specific things that we need to be looking at. So that needs to be put in the hopper here as well too. Councillor Greenfield?
Thank you, Worship. The amendment that I'm trying to bring forward, as far as I'm concerned, has nothing to do with downloading more duties onto staff. What it is intended to do is address a problem that's been with us for 3.5 years. We have a chance here to partner with a neighboring municipality on a capital project, and how many times have we gone to a conference and heard that that's the way to go? You partner, you work with your neighbors. Okay, we've got a chance here. It sounds as if Township of Chatsworth is willing to commit financially to these replacement projects, whatever it might be. To me, this is dealing with a quality of life issue, a deterioration in the quality of life for the fine people who live within, I would say, a 4 or 5 mile radius of these bridges. It has affected them economically, socially, and emotionally. And we're sitting here on our hands after 3.5 years. Okay, 3.5 years. In 3.5 years, this council term will be finished. and my duties at council will be finished, I want to leave a legacy to this municipality and the residents of the municipality. And I want that legacy to be one of services delivered, not services denied. Thank you, Your Worship.
Councillor Bartley.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Oh, can I just backtrack? Are you making that amendment, Councillor Greenfield? Okay, so we need a seconder for that amendment too, then.
What was the amendment?
Pardon? We don't have a seconder for Harley's amendment?
I believe Councillor Kentner seconded it.
Yes. Kentner did.
Oh, I beg your pardon.
Yes.
No. I'm confused. So Tony is, we'll worry about that later? All right, fine. Okay. Okay, so now, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Your Worship. And thank you, Councillor Greenfield, really passionately spoken and well said. Rob, I wanted to ask you, refresh my memory if you could, going back to maybe 3 years now, Council had a discussion about doing a second EA on Bridges 21 and 22, and I believe we set aside $50,000 at that time for that second EA, which we have not yet conducted. Could that $50,000 be redirected to perhaps proceed with the Bridge SOTI update?
Through your worship, council did set $50,000 aside. It could be redirected for that purpose. I think that there needs to be a recognition on the twin bridges that in reality, unless the municipality of Meaford is willing to pay full freight for the cost of the replacement of those structures, whatever that replacement might be, we can do nothing until a boundary road agreement is in place that establishes the responsibilities of both municipalities. And even more importantly than that, which is what the holdup has been on this, is the dispute resolution mechanism. So that if Meaford wants to go ahead, or Chatsworth in this case, wants to go ahead, and the other party does not, how do you resolve that dispute? So that's what we're trying to work through right now. So, I mean, I don't want to give anybody false hope. Our expectation and hope from staff's perspective, now that we've got a document in hand, is that council can pass a boundary road agreement before the end of July. All right? From that point, we then have to discuss what the go forward is on the bridge, like those bridges. And if one party wants to move forward and the other party doesn't, then we're going to be at a long-standing stalemate. If both parties actually come to a resolution to move forward, we still have to go through an EA process to determine the best structure that you'd put there, and then actually go out to get an engineer after the fact to design, then tender, then construct. Based on this timeline, the very, very best that we could ever assume would be that if we went through the process and it was determined that bridges would be replaced, they would not be replaced and used in allowing traffic to go across them until at best October of 2021. That is the very best timeline. It may even be a year beyond that because of environmental factors.
So the question then about removing the 50,000 and putting that into the Bridge SOTI, that's not appropriate until we understand exactly where the parameters are in terms of replacing those bridges and that boundary line.
But through your worship, my suggestion would be, since the money was there for that purpose, there's,
Should leave
no
it
matter
there.
what we do, there's still, like, we have liability there, right? Even if
Yeah.
the bridge, you know, even if the end result is that the bridges don't get replaced, they still have to be removed, and the area has to be remediated, which is gonna cost, you know, $150,000 probably, maybe even more. So, which, we're, you know, best case scenario, we're still going to come up with half of that. So I think that, you know, the money you know, should stay there for that. On the flip side, you know, my response to all of this was going to be with regards to, you know, Councillor Greenfield is putting money aside for this, for the bridge project. We've got the money now. You know, the immediacy of effect of using that money is going to be at best October 2021 if it's saved for those twin bridges versus another I mean, if it's council's determination to actually do a core infrastructure project versus the projects that we've amassed here, there's probably a different project that it should be used. You know, on the flip side, you know, the other part of the resolution was that concession A should be paved. You know, here's the example as to exactly why we want to do a transportation master plan and traffic counts. Because council, you know, if that resolution passed, is saying that concession A should be paved, but it's a low traffic road. What about all the higher traffic roads that are gravel that should have been paved? You know, are we making an informed decision in doing that road? That's the whole point of the transportation master plan, along with the traffic counts, because, you know, to Councillor Vickers' comment about traffic counts, what difference does it matter? The difference in traffic counts between less than 50 and 200 or more is the difference between a Class 6 road, which effectively has 0 requirements, whatever the municipality establishes, right, up to a Class 4 road, which has substantial requirements. And the maintenance, the operations, the snow plowing, everything is substantially different between Class 6, 5, and 4. So that's why traffic counts are very important in this whole process. So that council can make an informed decision to say, this road should be paved because it's still a gravel road right now, but it's got 450 cars a day going on it, versus another road that we want to do to provide a better level of service to people, you know, even though, you know, the traffic count is low. I mean, the very most, I know this because of the assessment of houses. The most highest assessed residential property within the municipality of Meaford is on a gravel road. And that assessed property is over $10 million, and it's on a gravel road.
Thanks, Councillor.
I'm just awfully confused. You want to spend all this money on our own equipment to do our own traffic counts, but you're saying you're only going to do traffic counts Monday to Friday. And I don't understand, on roads that are heavily traveled on weekends, why we're going to ignore that data and yet say that we're practicing science here.
So, through your worship, it's because of the average daily traffic as part of the requirements through the province of Ontario, again, going back to that minimum maintenance standard. That's how it's established, is a Monday to Friday, spring or fall, so that you take, it's not about taking the maximum traffic, it's about taking the average traffic, because we have to assume that, you know, the fourth section of road on second concession, right, is going to be, you know, just as busy on the weekend exponentially as the third second or the second section or the first section off of Highway 26 if it's all used on the week. Like every one of our roads, if we're a touristy kind of destination, every one of our roads is going to see that, you know, uptick in traffic on the weekends. That's kind of irrelevant. It's about getting average daily traffic, and that's, you know, it's a requirement for us to understand ADT so that we can actually establish what our maintenance practices would be, so that we, again, limit liability. I know that I harp on liability. Unfortunately, it's the reality of the game.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Your Worship. And just to respond to Mr. Chapman, and I appreciate what you're saying, but my feeling is that traffic counts can be totally skewed. If we take concession 2, for example, going out to Coffin Ridge, and we know how much traffic goes to Coffin Ridge, 78 or 80,000 cars a year, but if the traffic counters are out there last Friday when it was pouring rain, nobody's going to Coffin Ridge. If Friday was a warm, sunny, beautiful day, traffic is going out there. So it just seems to me that having a counter out there for a day or two doesn't guarantee that you're going to get an accurate count. So setting that aside and reminding council that we also put the surplus from 2018 and either Rob or Darcy will remind me of the amount, 275,000 roughly, into a bridge reserve. So thinking that we have 297, thank you. So recognizing that we have that to work with, and then we have this wonderful pot of money, and thinking that there's no urgency, we don't have to commit it today. I think we all are really passionate and want to do the right thing with this money. So I'm wondering if we, if we might need to set it into an infrastructure reserve for today and then reconsider what projects might be appropriate for it. But I certainly agree with Councillor Greenfield. We want to see 21 and 22 opened. I'm not happy with the timeline that Mr. Chapman has provided to us. Having attended Ogra, as everybody knows, and pursuing the contacts I made there with a number of bridge companies and recognizing that there are alternate and affordable solutions out there that we can utilize for these bridges. And it just doesn't make sense to me why we would have to wait 2 years to move forward with any one of those. I know from speaking with our friends in Chatsworth that they're moving forward with this agreement. They want to get it done as much as we do. And if we get that in place, then we can actually move forward and take advantage of some of those contacts to get some ideas on what alternates are out there for solutions. I would just really like to see us make a commitment to get those bridges done. But anyway, those are my thoughts.
Mr. Smith.
Madam Mayor, there is no need to do anything with this money today. In fact, we cannot transfer it anywhere because we don't actually have it yet. So if council doesn't feel like they can make a decision on what they want to use the money for, then I would strongly suggest deferring this report until sometime in the future to suit council, rather than saying that we're going to transfer it into a reserve, because we wouldn't do that transfer until December 31st anyway. So it really doesn't make a lot of difference.
Just further to that, my understanding is that this is an amount that can be used in 2 years. Is that correct? So there is somewhat of a time limit on it, but it's 2 years away from it.
That seems to be the general principle. It is unconditional. We are being asked to report on what we do with it, but I don't believe it's going to be taken back if it's not used by December 2021.
Okay. Okay, well, Councillor Bartley.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I was cut off at my last term. I'll try it again. Everybody in the room knows that I'm an infrastructure guy, and I would like to accept Harley's motion to put it into bridges, but I don't believe that's the right thing to do. Some of these things on this list are needed. We expect our staff to go through and make decisions and do things. If we don't give them the proper tools, they can't do that job. Now, I apologize for my ignorance. I still don't know what half these things are and how important they are. And I think before we move forward, we have to have an education section on what these things are. For example, Darcy just told us it could be 2 years before we can replace a bridge. Nobody on this table understands that. That should be explained to us why it takes that long. Again, there's things on here I could cut right now. And then the last thing, putting synthetic ice again that we don't want, is in there. I think we need an education session on some of these, because we can't move forward properly without some of these tools. I believe some of them tools are necessary. Not them all, but I'm not educated enough to tell you which ones. I really not, and I think, like you said, we should put aside, but we can't just put it aside and wait for it to prop up a few months down the road. We need to understand, and I'm going to dig into some of these things, why they're necessary. Now, some of them, I wrote notes down that we're going to hire consultants, we're going to hire students to come out of school and tell experienced staff how to shuffle paper or do something. I thought that was ridiculous. But I'm reading it wrong. Like I said, I'm not educated on these things. Then there's a report on whether we should or shouldn't close a bridge. Well, I thought it was clear from this council that we're not going to close a bridge. So that one should be set aside because we're not going to close any more bridges. We're going to somehow work towards keeping them open. So if that's what that one line is for, is to determine whether we're going or not, we could take that one out. But until we get educated on this stuff, I don't think we can make that decision. Thank you.
Rob?
Yeah, through your worship, this report was brought forward with ideas because council asked for us to bring a report with ideas. A decision, as verified, does not have to be made tonight. This can just be tabled. The further education, further explanation can be provided. We can explore the other stuff at this time. The money, I believe, Matt said it hasn't right. It is actually in our bank account. We received it, but we don't have to decide what we're going to do with it till the end of the year. Then we'll have to either put it in a reserve or do something with it at that point in time. So I think it's not necessary if council wants to wait on this funding. It's not priority that we make the commitment today.
Okay. So, Councillor Kent, yeah.
I wonder if Harley would like his motion voted on.
Through you, Madam Mayor, it depends on what council wishes to do. If there is a motion to defer, then the motion to defer is dealt with first. If not, then the amendment to the amendment is dealt with first, then the amendment, then the main motion.
I got that. So what is council's wish? The suggestion to defer? Is there some, Councillor Bell?
Thanks, Madam Mayor. I think that now that we know that we have the money, we can put that towards something. So I am prepared to move starting with Deputy Mayor's amendment and then move to Councillor.
Okay. So there is no motion to defer. Then we will proceed with the amendments as they have been forwarded. And the first one is, I'll go back to my, actually we start with the first amendment.
So we start with the amendment to the amendment, so that's Councillor Keaveney's amendment of
And the 50,000.
Deputy Mayor Keaveney's amendment to Councillor Greenfield's motion, and my understanding of that was that the amendment be amended to reflect that $50,000 will be allocated to the hiring of a doctor recruiter through North East Grey Health Clinics. And I believe that was seconded by Councillor Bell.
Councillor Bell, that's right, I had that. I would like to speak to that actually, because I think one of the things that we have not had a chance to understand in terms of this council is what the impact of this crisis that we're in. We're just hearing in full volume about this crisis that is facing us with your terms of physician recruitment. It is a crisis. I fully admit that and support that. I've been talking about this now for several years. But is this the right way to go about it is the question. And I think that we attended, and Deputy Mayor attended this forum we had in the beginning of April the 9th, I think it was. It was a Grey Bruce Health Services forum on this very issue, how to secure a workforce within Grey Bruce with regard to the healthcare industry, if you will. And at that meeting, there was roundtable discussions and many opinions from physicians who are here in the Hanover area, and what can be done in terms of the things that have to be in place to recruit and retain physicians in our area. One of the things that was really a prime example of what is missing in terms of our area here is that we do not have a system of mentoring and proctoring physicians, young physicians who are coming in. We certainly have the medium for them to enjoy, have a profitable career, but also a lifestyle that they want. and what we all enjoy here in terms of lifestyle. But what they need mostly in the process of determining where they want to set up their practice is the support through mentoring and through teaching at the hospital level. That is where we have a problem. I think there are other things that we have to take into account in terms of decisions and discussions that happened at that forum, one of which was to create a much broader focus for physician recruitment, to incorporate some of the mentorship and the teaching opportunities throughout our region, and we're not there yet. So I'm reluctant somewhat because there are other aspects of our healthcare system too that we have been working on to impact the healthcare from some particular citizens that we have within us, and there may be other avenues to put that $50,000. I think that setting it aside, but not designating it as that, I could certainly entertain in terms of needing perhaps some seed money coming forward for some other operations that we've got at our hospital. Because for me, saving our hospital is very, very important. And while this is one aspect of it, there are others aspects of it as well. And until we have that full discussion, until we have that full understanding of what we are dealing with and what the potential is, I'm very reluctant to put anything on a single project dealing with the primary care access. There are other opportunities, and we are going to be looking at various other potentials on that one, including what the provincial government has put forward as their suggestion going forward, which is creating family health teams. And this is something that is going to be under discussion as well down the road. So just having said that, is there any further discussion on that particular motion? Councillor Keaveney.
Thank you, Your Worship, and I was going to speak to this when we, later on in the meeting when we reported from county, but I think it's appropriate to bring it forward now to this council to make sure that everyone is aware of a notice of motion that came forward to the county at our last meeting by Councillor Bartnicki from the town of Blue Mountains, and I certainly supported it and spoke to it, as did our mayor. And the gist of it is that the county has $200,000 a year that they set aside for health spending. They had made a commitment to the Owen Sound Hospital, which is now complete. So we were asking county staff to bring us back a report on how that money might be allocated in future. And part of that report is going to be information on recruiting and retention of primary care physicians, and we will have this report by the end of June. So I'm suggesting that, as I stated already, we don't have all the details yet as to how a doctor recruiter would be, how that role would be created or implemented, or who it would be responsible to, and all of those sorts of things. But I'm just asking that the money be set aside for that purpose, and it can be rediscussed at a later date when we relook at the partnership between the municipality of Meaford and the town of Blue Mountains, because to my way of thinking, and I appreciate the mayor's comments about the importance of our hospital and its sustainability, but I don't think our hospital survives at all if we don't have doctors. We need doctors to man the ER, and we need doctors to look after our patients. So again, I suggest that we set aside this money with the potential of directing it towards a doctor recruiter when we revisit it with more information.
Sorry, Madam Mayor, if I can just leap in on a process point of view. This is one of those occasions when words are really important. So we need to have clarity on what this motion actually is. If the motion is to dedicate $50,000 for a doctor recruiter with North East Grey Health Clinics, then that is a done deal and it happens. If the motion is to set aside $50,000 for future healthcare costs and a future conversation, that needs to say something different.
And with your worship's indulgence, I would ask, Matt, that you also add a clause in relation to a partnership with the town of Blue Mountains.
Well, but that is a very specific, no, that is a very specific request then.
Yeah. Okay, so to
If,
clarification?
if it's, if it's money being sent to the North East Grey Health Clinics, Inc., it doesn't matter whether it's a partnership with the town of Blue Mountains or not, because it's going to an organisation that is dealing with this. And this is why words are really important here, because what you decide to do makes a difference as to what we would, you know, if council passes a resolution that says this money should be allocated to North East Grey Health Clinics for a doctor recruiter, Darcy and I will cut a cheque tomorrow, well, in 2 weeks' time after council passes it. But if it's for healthcare and further investigations, then that's that. The partnership with the town of Blue Mountains is fairly irrelevant to this, because we're not actually in negotiations with the town of the Blue Mountains.
No, except that, Your Worship, the salary of the recruiter would be split between Meaford and the town of Blue Mountains. So if one of us doesn't comply, then the project doesn't move forward.
That, with the greatest of respect for you, Madam Mayor, that wasn't what the North East Grey Health Clinics asked us for. They asked us for $50,000 to pay for a doctor recruiter. Whether the town of the Blue Mountains kicks in their money or not is irrelevant to this decision today.
The other piece to that is for 1 year. This would not be a one-year deal. This is a recurring program that, in spite of this wonderful amount that we can put forward here at this stage, we would then have to find the $50,000 for the commitments for the next 4 years.
With Your Worship, through you, yes, it's a requirement of more than $50,000 for 5 years. So it answers the purpose of the grant, you know, from the standpoint of collaborating with neighbors. However, it is more than $50,000. It would be a commitment of $50,000, and that, you know, expands a bit over the next 5 years. So we just have to have in the back of our minds where that money would come from each successive year, and whether, you know, we will get what we need from it.
Councillor Greenfield. Councillor Greenfield?
I think the Deputy Mayor had one more.
Yes, we'll get to her. Councillor Greenfield.
Okay, thank you, Your Worship. Doctor's recruitment, there was a red flag went up for me. We now are mandated to provide so many other services. This one is not on our list currently. I know we heard earlier we've got an aging society, no denial there, personally. But a few years ago, I was without a doctor for a couple of years, and I had to knock on a number of doors, but I did find a doctor and have had a doctor ever since, thank goodness. But I see doctor recruitment as more of an economic development factor, and I'm wondering maybe if you know, in our economic development strategy, if we could sort of work doctor recruitment in, because there's certainly there's no doubt about it, a well-doctored area is going to be an attraction for a great many people, older, younger, what have you. So I guess I'm kind of looking at it more under that description, as opposed to just putting out $50,000 for a recruiter who may or may not be successful.
I certainly agree with your concept about this being an economic development issue, because it does impact our economy. It impacts our ability to attract new residents. It impacts the health and wellness of our whole municipality, which is why it, you know, to be looking at this in isolation of all of the issues that have an impact on this. It's not only physicians that need to be recruited in terms of primary care access. There's also PSWs. There's also all kinds of healthcare workers who can help and address some of the health and wellness issues that we have in our community. Certainly, physicians is a big one, and we need physicians. We absolutely do. But I'm not convinced that this is the only way that we can affect this going forward. We can work with the region, we can work with and their plan going forward for a regional approach to this. And we can also work with our neighbors in other ways to look at other mechanisms as well. I think it is important. We all recognize that it's important, and hospitals do need doctors. Patients need doctors. But I'm just reluctant to put this money now, knowing that it is going to be a commitment, $50,000 rather, from this pot of money, but $250,000 from the general taxpayer as we go ahead with 5 years further. Sorry, $200,000 more. Councillor Vickers.
My concern with this whole thing about the doctors is we're really getting the waters muddied here. Like, I think if we're going to try and decide what to do with this money, then let's try and decide what to do with it. But to all of a sudden throw in something about the doctors, I would rather discuss it on a very separate platform and not get it. This is getting terribly muddied as it is, and it's going to be hard to get anything passed, as opposed to putting this doctor thing in. I believe in it and everything else. We're just getting bogged here badly.
Yeah, Councillor Bell.
Madam Mayor, call the question. Thank you.
Okay.
Excellently timed, Chris. So procedurally, a call the question has to be voted on. It's not debatable.
Yeah.
But I would, before we call the question, please ask again, just for clarification on what exactly the motion that we're about to call the question on is.
Okay, so the amendment then to Councillor Greenfield's motion would be to set aside $50,000 from this $642,000 into, we'll just call it a health account to be addressed at a later date, but to be potentially dedicated to the hiring of a doctor recruiter.
Through your worship, just to be clear, first of all, we don't have any kind of like a health account or health reserve, so if this goes forward, I'm going to have to bring a bylaw forward to establish a health reserve or something along those lines.
There's other ways that this can be looked at too. You've already talked to the foundation. So there is other ways that this can be done. Anyway, I've been asked to call a question, so I will call the question. Oh, wait a minute. Are we clear on the amendment? The word potential was perhaps not clarity enough.
I think Chris needs to answer that, because he's the one that's the taker of the minutes. He's the one that has the words down. I'm not too sure what he's got down.
Is he?
Thinks is what should be down, but Chris has command of the words right now. So I would prefer, sorry about putting you on the spot, Chris, but you're the one that has whatever the words are, and I would like to hear what Chris thinks the words are. That's all I'm saying, Chris.
Thank you very much, Councillor Vickers. Through your worship, the wording that I have is to amend the amendment, being that Councillor Greenfield's amendment, to allocate $50,000 towards a healthcare fund, and then beyond that, there was some mention of potentially including some wording regarding putting that towards a physician recruiter. I feel like that's maybe outside the scope of the amendment, but I'll leave that up to you to determine.
Madam Mayor, I would gently suggest that allocating $50,000 to a future healthcare decision and leaving it at that would be enough, rather than, I guess, if we sort of say potentially something and something else, then we're getting
into the weeds.
Yes.
Further. So you'll agree to that then, the healthcare fund? Okay. Anything further? I'll call the question then. Everybody's clear on the motion to create the 50,000 into a healthcare fund. All in favor? And those opposed? 2, 3, 4, the motion is defeated. Okay, so then we go to Councillor Greenfield's amendment to put all of this into bridges. If you would, please.
That the $642,000 grant from the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing be directed to the cost of the actual replacing of bridges 21 and 22, plus the assurance that concession A from Side Road 18 to the Birches be resurfaced with asphalt paving. I'm hoping that's clear enough.
Any process concerns on that?
Through your worship, I don't know if I'll ask Matt after I ask the question, I guess, if it matters, but it might matter that it should be concession A first over the bridges, because we don't know what the cost of the bridges are going to be. So I would assume that the intention of Councillor Greenfield is to have money available to pave concession A, and then whatever is left over goes towards the twin bridges. So it might be best that that it's flipped around, that concession A is first in the motion and then followed by the bridges.
You're in agreement with that? Okay.
I think just to make clear, and Chris I'm sure is writing the words, that this is the difference between the surface treatment and the paving. It's not, we need to be careful about what we say here, because if we say it's being allocated to the paving of concession A, then the money that we've already allocated to the surface treatment of concession A in the budget kind of disappears and is replaced by this. So it needs to say that it's dedicated to the additional service, in effect, the paving rather than the surface treatment, because the surface treatment is already in the budget. No.
In regards to concession A, I understand in the budget now, we're looking at HCB.
Through your worship, the budget, it has money set aside for a double surface treatment. We, in the past, have gone through projects like this where we asked for provisional pricing for alternative surfaces, which we've done in this project, and then typically staff actually, as part of the award report, goes through a financial analysis to determine whether it's actually financially feasible to go with a better surface. So the best example is the chunk of concession A that we did, second concession, where the overall price was more expensive to go with asphalt, but when you look at it from a 25-year life cycle perspective, it was actually slightly less expensive than surface treatment, because asphalt you do once over 25 years, it's done, whereas the surface treatment you had to go back and do three resurfacings. So, and that's why I'm saying until the tender pricing comes in, we have no idea whether that makes financially viable sense or not.
But we still have that in the budget to move it up into that level.
Well, there's money in the budget for the double surface treatment only. It's just over $400,000. We're hoping that that's enough money to do double surface treatment. Who knows what the tender pricing is? The whole project might come back over budget. The whole project might come in under budget, and doing asphalt still fits within that budget. We won't know for another 3 weeks.
Okay. Just one moment, Councillor Kettner.
I just have to ask a question. I don't understand what double surface treatment means and how it compares to an asphalt surface.
Sure, through your worship. So double surface, surface treatment is effectively tar and chip. So they lay crushed stone down, they spread or spray an emulsion over top of it, then it gets rolled out, and over time the loose stone on top works its way off to the side, then you're left with the tar and chip, right? So double surface tar and chip means that it's still the same process, but they spray 2 applications of emulsion on top, which actually allows it to have a longer life cycle. So single surface treatment road, you probably get 3-4 years of life out of it. Double surface, you're getting 5 to 7 years. Asphalt, you know, depending, what we'd be asking for here is a 50 milliliter, so a 2-inch lift of HL4 asphalt. You'd probably be getting, depending on the quality of the road, drainage, so on and so forth, between 15 and 25 years of life.
I'm certainly in favor of that. I don't want these people coming back anymore.
Councillor Greenfield?
Thanks, Your Worship. Thanks, Mr. Chairman. What I'm trying to guarantee here is we have an estimate in the budget for double surface treatment, and say that's 300,000, just for the sake of a number, and I'm not suggesting that that's anywhere near it. If indeed we can have concession A paved with asphalt for 400,000, I would like to take 100,000 from the 642 and bump it up to
Yeah.
that's what I'm asking for.
So through your worship, the only thing I've been saying is if it's 100, like, not knowing all of the variables, from staff's perspective, the $100,000 might be extremely expensive and not a good use of financial resources, or it might actually be more efficient because over that 25-year life cycle. That's why I'm saying from my perspective, it's premature to, I mean, if we don't know what the situation is for concession A yet, because the tender hasn't been finalized and we haven't been able to bring a report forward, and if the bridges we know aren't going to happen anytime soon, if the intention of this money is for those 2 projects, it's just as easy to do one of 2 things: put the money in the infrastructure reserve, or just defer this until we at least know concession A, right, at a baseline, because then council can say, well, you know, $100,000 is going to concession A because we want the asphalt and it makes financial sense, and then every other penny goes to bridges 21 and 22. So if that's really the expectation of council for those 2 projects, you might as well defer for another month until we know what the pricing is.
I'm not opposed to putting it into a reserve. The term defer scares me. I would rather see this money locked in so that it could be used if and when, or not if and when the opportunity arises. As I say, deferral, I just don't like the ring of.
Councillor Vickers.
I'd like to speak, through your worship, I'd like to speak against this motion, because I think all this will do is create a letter writing campaign that every time somebody wants something done, they will just send us 100 emails and put enough pressure on council, whether it's a good decision or a bad decision. We'll just be pressured into doing everything what the public wants. And that's really not what the council is for. We are here to counsel for everybody, not for the people on concession A.
Okay. So where are we on this? Any further discussion? Then the amendment.
So the amendment is that the motion be replaced with the text that Councillor Greenfield read out, which I'm sure he'll provide to us, but in effect says that the money will be allocated to the additional asphalt in place of surface treatment, the additional costs for asphalting instead of surface treating concession A, and then set aside for reconstruction of bridges 21 and 22.
Okay. I will then call the question for, as read out. We're all understanding what it is we're voting on. All in favor of this motion? 1, 2, 3, 4. Those against? 1, 2, and 3. That is carried. There goes your 642,000.
And then, Madam Mayor, just for procedure's sake, that was an amendment, so you need to vote again on what is now the same text.
Okay, so I've lost it here. Approve the allocation of the small rural municipalities resources to improve service delivery and efficiency grant, just as it states within the, we can use that.
Sorry, through your worship, you're now voting to says that committee of the whole recommend council of the municipality of Meaford allocate the small and rural municipalities resources to improve service delivery and efficiency grant to the asphalting of concession A instead of the existing planned surface treatment, and the remainder to be set aside for bridges 21 and 22.
Okay? Yes.
Now that we've kind of played our cards, would a smart contractor know that they have us in a spot? Hate to kind of do the obvious, but this could cost us a very expensive chunk of road, and the 642,000 could disappear very quickly. I caution us all on this last motion. Be careful what you wish for, because sometimes wishes do come true.
Okay, Councillor Bell?
Thank you, Madam Mayor, just for a kind comment to my Councillor Vickers. That's the way it works with all of the budget things. When we say we're going to tender a bridge and we put a number at it, contractors know that number. So no matter what you say, when it goes out, they know where council's stand on things are. So that's kind of how it works.
And through you, Madam Mayor, just to say, just in response to both Councillor Bell and Councillor Vickers, that we hope, obviously, that we'll get multiple bids, so that hopefully won't happen. But of course, there will have to be an award report come to council, so council will get a decision time at that stage as well about whether they actually do want to go ahead with this, if the money seems outrageous.
Okay. All right.
But we are leaving ourselves very open-ended. Like this isn't a maybe. This is a motion that's been brought forward saying that this is what we're going to do.
Thank you. Okay, I'll call the question. All in favor of this motion going forward? It's your motion. No, we have to be very clear on what we're voting for here.
So, because the amendment was a replacing amendment, you've basically already voted in favour of this, but you have to vote for it again because it's now what's called the main motion. So the main motion says that Committee of the Whole recommend that Council of the Municipality of Meaford approve the allocation of the small and rural municipalities' resources to improve service delivery and efficiency grant to the asphalting of concession A in place of the surface treatment currently budgeted, and the remainder to be allocated to bridges 21 and 22.
Okay. Do you want a recorded vote on that? No? All right. I'll call the question again. All in favor? And those against? And that is carried. Okay, can we move on then to Development Environmental Services, DES 2019-24, the Municipal Engineering Standards Update. Mover and a seconder, please. Councillor Greenfield. Councillor Bartley. Okay, and off we go to Rob.
Thank you, Worship. The Municipality of Meaford has a set of approved engineering standards that were approved by Council in 2005. Over the time, they have been updated based on technology changes. These are engineering standards that are given to engineers who are doing a municipal project and have to comply with our engineering standards. In addition, they're given to developers, engineers, so that the work they're designing and proposing complies with our standards. As I noted, over the period of time, there have been changes made based on technology, and the report highlights some of those minor changes that have been made. From an administrative point of view, staff are putting forward these latest standards to get approved by council to replace the old standards, because truly that's what they are, is older standards that reflect older technology, so we're asking council to approve these updated standards at this time. It's noted in the report that we will be looking more wholesomely at bringing further updates to the standards that will be more comprehensive in nature, that might consider other elements of design going forward.
Thanks, Rob. Comments, questions? Seeing none? Oh, sorry. Councillor Greenfield?
Thanks. It was just a comment. I really appreciated the diagrams, the description. It was interesting to know exactly what is under the ground and what role they play. Thanks for that.
Okay, thank you. Anything further? Then I will call the question. All in favor of receiving this report, and that is carried. Financial Services and Infrastructure Management, an award of tender FIM 2019-23, hot mix asphalt road resurfacing. Mover and a seconder, please, to put that on the table. Councillor Bartley, Councillor Bell.
Through your worship, standard purchasing report asking for approval, given that the project came in, which we fully expected, over the $150,000 delegated authority. It is worth noting that although we are saving significant money from the budget, a portion of it is just good pricing, a portion of it also results from deferral of projects. We had a couple of projects in the queue to do some resurfacing on, which we are holding off on doing because they're in the urban area, and we've come to realize over the winter that there are some more significant in-ground infrastructure issues. So there's no point in putting a nice blacktop on top of a road that's got water or sewer related problems underneath, and we're not replacing them at the same time. So we've deferred those projects.
Good, thank you. Any questions? Darcy, comments? Councillor Bartley.
Thank you. Darcy, when it says the contingency amount of $56,000 to address minor quality and asphalt price index adjustments as included in the Ontario provincial standards, is the Ontario provincial standards up in their game on some of these roads, or where does that come from?
Through your worship, no, this isn't like a provincial standards as far as like a province standard. This is the OPS GCC, so it's the the province's standard for contracts when it comes to road construction. So, you know, we ask for X quantity of hot mix asphalt in this tender price. And to make it fair for everybody right now, the competitors then bid on that asphalt based on kind of the current rack rate of asphalt. You get to the summer, and the asphalt cost could be substantially different. And in the past, what we've noticed is it's good that we get these tenders out the door. You know, we get the contractor secured and everything else to get the work in the queue, but usually asphalt costs are higher in the summer than they are in, you know, the winter or the spring when we're doing the tendering. So typically the final price is always coming in over the actual tender, and it's not because, you know, we're doing another kilometer of road, it's just because the cost of asphalt is that much higher. So there's one of two ways of doing it. This way, where it's you know, the price that's bid on is the current price at the time of tender, and then we allow for that stipulated price to change based on contract law, or you develop a stipulated price contract, right? So we could tender it saying, you can do the work whenever you want, up till X date, like we do right now. This is the quantity that we want, and we are unwilling to provide you with any kind of a change in price, right, based on whatever the market is. So then that contractor takes, you know, and determines based on what they believe to be the market factors, they'll take that chance. Quite often, those contractors build in a hefty margin of error, and usually you're paying more at the end of the day than you would just by doing it this way. But I mean, by doing it that way, at least you know what the final cost is no matter what. But usually it's, you know, you look at the case studies of this, it's usually higher than if you just allow the OPS standards to play a part.
So they may not get that extra 56,000?
They may not. It all depends on, I mean, some of it might be minor stuff, right? Like we get in there and there's, slightly different quantities based on the final price because, just of what's used. Maybe there may be some extra padding that had to happen somewhere along the road, or, we actually had to deal with a little bit more material being removed because of some culverts that were being replaced, so on and so forth. So part of it is change orders actually because of field issues, but the large majority of it is that contract price that could fluctuate. So if prices go down, we actually do better at the end of the day. If prices go up, then we've got the contingency necessary to still move forward.
Okay, I understand that now, and going back to Councillor Vickers' point, now it's on paper that we've got an extra 56,000 for the contract, they can just put that in there and...
No, they can't, because they actually have to prove at the time of work what the current asphalt price is. Like, there's a price index that we have access to, so they can't play with those numbers.
Thank you, sir.
Anything further? I'll call a question. All in favor? And that is carried. I need a motion to extend. We've reached our limit. Deputy Mayor, Councillor Bell, thank you. All in favor? That is carried. FIM 2019-24, the award of tender for surface treatment. Can I have a mover and a seconder for that, please? Deputy Mayor, Councillor Kentner. Okay. And another,
Yes.
Darcy?
Through your worship, so I won't claim that I was lucky in this process. There was strategy to the reports that are in front of you and the timing of the reports. So the last report we just went through showed a $178,000 surplus to the good based on budget. This new report that we're looking at is requesting council to approve a $181,000 transfer from reserve funds as an over budget expenditure. The main reason for the over expenditure is because of two of the surface treated roads that we were planning on doing. We had a program in place where we were just going to be doing single or, in large part, single surfacing on some of these roads just as kind of maintenance resurfacing. This winter was very unkind to a section of the 6th concession and also 21st Side Road. We are now, those roads, the surface on those roads are just, like, you can't put a surface treatment over them. They would last 2 years probably at best and then just blow up. We had some heavy truck traffic that was half load, it was still half load, but there was an excessive number of vehicles going down that road. Even though half loaded, and it blew the road up for a good whole section of it. The 21st Side Road just didn't last. This is the chunk that's going to Roebuck's Campground. If you drive it, like, it's both of those, they've just completely blown up. We cannot resurface them. So what has to happen is they actually have to be pulverized, reshaped, resurfaced, and then shouldered. And that's why the cost is substantially more than budget, because it's far more than just a minor maintenance resurfacing. But the only other alternative if we don't do this is to just pulverize them and they become gravel roads.
Shudder. Thank you. Councillor Bartley.
Darcy, you have to take that out of your vocabulary. What is microsurfacing? Is that just a single treatment you were going to try?
Through your worship, no, the microsurfacing, so probably the best piece of road that I can explain is going up the hill on Syke Street towards the Tim Horton. There's that little chunk of black asphalt, blacktop. We used that as a test case last year. It's typically applied at no more than 20 mils, so less than a half an inch, and it doesn't have like a thick consistency like asphalt. It's more of a slurry that they put on. The intention of it is kind of to work as that next step after crack filling. So you do crack filling, then you would do microsurfacing, which helps with wheel rutting and also to kind of cap, the surface of the overall road. And then that microsurfacing typically only lasts 3 to 5 years. And then the next step is to actually go in and do a milling of that whole surface and then repave it. But we've tried it on a couple road sections. We're holding off on some of the microsurfacing that was scheduled for this year, simply because the price was twice what we received last year for price. And then when you start to compare it to the cost of asphalt and the life expectancy, it no longer makes sense. I mean, you get 3 to 5 years at best, and it's a quarter of the price of asphalt. Well, the asphalt, is going to last for, 15 to 25 years, so there's no point in doing a minor maintenance thing. So that's why we've held off on doing the microsurfacing.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, any other questions? Call the question, all in favor? And that is carried. FIM 2019-25, the LED Streetlight project update and some debenture options. Can I have a mover and a seconder, Councillor Bartley and Councillor Greenfield?
Yes.
And, yeah,
Through
back
your
to you,
worship.
please.
Yes, so we went through a streetlight upgrade a couple of years ago. It's taken some time it was over a year and a half process of actually going through and updating all the lights, because some of them were decorative, so they were special order, so on and so forth. And then the project had to wrap up before the consulting company that was part of this could actually apply to the province for the Save on Energy, which then took quite a period of time, and we didn't finally get the Save on Energy grant until 2018. Throughout this process, we've been, constantly chipping away a little bit at the total project cost by way of the savings that we had in the budget annually from the electricity consumption. So at the end of the day, the total project cost of just about $505,000. The net amount still outstanding that has to be paid after what we've paid over the last couple of years, plus the retrofit grant, is just pennies shy of $300,000. So we've got an amount of $299,000 and change that needs to be debentured. When we first brought this forward to council, we said that we were going to go through a 10-year Infrastructure Ontario loan. We still could do that. Infrastructure Ontario, though, is very unflexible. You can't pick and choose. Everything is in multiples of 5, so you either do 5 years or 10 years. You can't do the 7 years, which kind of is what's remaining within this project. As well, we've got significant cash flow, with the municipality right now. So our recommendation is to internally finance this. We've used a bylaw and a process example that's been used a couple times actually with the City of Owen Sound. This process has already been approved. We vetted this through BDO, our auditors, to make sure that they were satisfied with this process as well. So what we're saying is that this will actually be, and very specific within the bylaw, that we're going to use development charges as the funding source for this. So the interest that will accumulate off of this debenture will actually go back to the development charges and form part of that investment portfolio return over the next 7 years.
Okay, thank you. Yep, any questions, comments? Councillor Greenfield.
Your worship, through you to Mr. Chapman, this conversion is going to save us some money in the long run. It's not going to make us money, but it will. Do you have any estimate, or is it too early for an estimate of reduction in costs?
Through your worship, there's intrinsic savings, but the real savings, we're looking at annual repayments of about $47,000. The net savings on electricity from the conversion were give or take about $60,000 a year. So the taxpayer has got a real savings of about $13,000. On top of that, a lot of our lighting infrastructure was getting to that 10 to 15 year period of age anyways, where it was going to have to be replaced as it was. So this whole process has actually saved us from effectively having to finance all that infrastructure as well, because now we're financing that infrastructure through the savings of the energy. So there were significant benefits in doing this project.
Sounds good. Yes, Councillor Kentner.
Question, I think I asked this last time, but I noticed on the weekend all the streetlights from Nelson to the other side of the bridge were out on the west side, and all the bridge lights were out. Again.
Through your worship, they're still working on fixing all of the downtown lighting issues. So we've been having some struggles, but the contractors, they're pulling the lights off and rewiring from pole to pole to pole. So we're getting closer. I certainly hope we're getting very close because it's becoming extremely costly. So.
Okay, I'll call the question. All in favor of this part, and that is carried. And the last FIM 2019-26, the fleet justification for the Elgin Pelican street sweeper. Mover and a seconder, please, to put that on the table. Deputy Mayor and Councillor Kentner. Back to you again.
Yes, Your Worship. So in an effort to try and make sure that I don't continue to bore you with my voice, we're actually going to ask Cindy Nolan to come up and present the report and be here for you if any questions. Cindy is, of course, our new Manager of Transportation and Fleet, so I felt this was definitely a good opportunity to get her face in front of Council because this is a fleet-related issue.
Well, welcome, since this is the first, perhaps, of many.
Through your worship, I'm going to speak to the fleet justification for the Elgin Pelican street sweeper. The Committee of the Whole recommended the Council of Municipality of Meaford direct staff to develop a tender for contracted services for street sweeping in 2020. In accordance with the service delivery review, fleet management, the street sweeper is deemed to be a specialized piece of equipment required the completion of business case supporting the replacement to be completed before replacing the vehicle. The existing piece of equipment is a 2011 Elgin Pelican street sweeper. The current vehicle is used for one singular function, annual street sweeping within the urban area. The primarily used annually April through early May. Currently, the machinery runs continuously for approximately 5 weeks during the spring, completing the winter sand cleanup. The vehicle is also used approximately 80 hours sporadically for events-based cleanups and during the fall leaf collection. Many neighboring municipalities, including the town of Blue Mountains, Georgian Bluffs, and even Grey County, contract out street sweeping. Rental costs, transportation and fleet services can acquire a street sweeper rental for approximately $6,500 per month with a 5-month minimum, $32,500 annually. Overall, using the equipment yearly to complete less than 300 hours of work cannot justify the need to keep the equipment within the current fleet. The current cost to complete spring street sweeping is approximately $15,000. Based on current pricing obtained from other municipalities and Grey County, expected to pay $13,000 to $20,000. The approach may not save significantly on operational dollars, but would potentially save the need for a garage bay, which costs $150,000 to construct and $5,000 annually to operate and maintain. Should the contract price be excessive, the municipality could retain the equipment or potentially rent the equipment and utilize staff. As for special events, we do have other pieces of equipment, a front-mounted sweeper, a heavy-duty on a heavy-duty pickup truck, and we also have a water truck that can keep the dust down. We have contacted local contractors with expected equipment prices, somewhere in the nature of $62.50 to $70 per hour, resulting in a total cost of around $14,000. The current market value of the 2011 Elgin street sweeper is around $70,000 if we were to put it on GovDeals. Completing this, less than 300 hours of work annually with this highly specialized vehicle does not justify the need to keep this piece of equipment. Staff recommends contracting out the service annually if it makes sense. So our recommendation is that Council give us the opportunity to go to tender and see what the cost of contracted prices are, and if it's feasible to move forward in that direction, and then consider the sale of the street sweeper.
Okay, thank you, Cynthia. Councillor Bartley.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, Cindy. You're going to try to contract a street sweeper in the spring. That's when everybody else wants them. You're confident you could get one when you need it?
If we put the tender out in the winter time, we've completed our street sweeping mostly for this year. Like, we're gonna be doing a little bit more next, so we're not gonna be considering selling it this year. It would be for the 2020. So if we put it out in the winter months and kind of got ahead of some of these other municipalities, then I think we have a pretty good shot at getting a street sweeper.
So we wouldn't sell it now, we would sell it next year if all the ducks fell in the right row.
Right.
Okay?
Councillor Bell.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you for your report. You don't know me, but a little bit on the sidebars, I'm into equipment, and we have a piece of equipment here that even though you're not using it that much, for the residual value of what we might get for it, I believe that it would be worth us to have that piece of kit and to keep that piece of kit so we can do when we want, where we want, and it really does not cost a lot of money to have that. And when I read the line on page 3 of 5 that says we have an attachment to be put on the front of a pickup truck with water, there was no money assigned to that, to the costings of those operators working and doing that. Plus, I think everybody around council knows what that piece of equipment looks like. It's a great big brush head that basically flicks things straight out, whereas this machine is a sweeper and it puts it into a hopper. And so to take it downtown prior to a parade, I can tell you, I believe that we will get some feedback from a mounted piece of equipment on a pickup truck when we have a street sweeping machine. So I am saying that I can't move forward on getting rid of the sweeper. I mean, I have equipment that I have invested about that much money, and once in a while when we use it, it's worthy. I've got the timing, I've got the service to be put down. And the other thing about it is, when we have our employees that are trained to use this, there is never any report as to where and what and type the employees will be deployed to. So I don't know whether it's 1 personnel or 2 or 4 that are involved in doing this kind of work. But again, in retrospect, I don't think we should have even got rid of the sucker machine. I think that we lost that piece of kit too. Anyway, on this one, I don't think I'm going to move in getting rid of this with a residual value of, $20,000 to do in-house work. Thanks.
70,000 is the price on that. Cynthia, if I may, I just want to ask about collecting the excessive sand that we use on our roads, on road maintenance, and how that would work with a contracted service. Because I think we have been able to recycle this on occasion in past years. In terms of the excessive sand that's on the roads, and I can tell because they're right out in front of my driveway. How would that work in terms of a contracted service?
So we spoke about that today, and then we thought of a couple of different options. A lot of these kind of tenders that go out, they specify that the contractor takes the sand away and is disposed of at their site of choice. That's part of it. Or the other option, and Darcy and I were speaking about today, is actually bringing it here, and then you'd have to go through the process of sifting it all out. And then my question would be, is that going to provide spec sand for you moving forward? Because of liability purposes, we want to have it the way it should be, right? So there's 2 options, right? We could either have them take it away, or we could have it disposed of here at our yard.
Right. And I guess the cost of sifting through and making that spec ready, if you will, recycling it, what's the cost of that going forward? We have to keep that in mind as well.
Right.
Okay. Councillor Greenfield.
Thanks, Your Worship. Thanks, Ms. Nolan, for your report. In the report, it mentions briefly about housing this piece of equipment. Is that a problem currently? Do we have to leave it outside, or just what is the problem there?
Through your worship, I'll actually take that one, just because that's the reason that one of the main reasons this report came forward. So on the Vector truck, as Councillor Bell mentioned, it was pretty clear that there was significant savings to us just contracting it versus keeping the piece of equipment. what we're asking for is council's approval just to kind of kick the tires on a contract here with this one to see whether it makes financial sense or not. As Cindy mentioned in the presentation of the report, there's not going to be significant operational savings one way or another because it's not huge dollars we're talking about. It's the garage bay that's the issue. We have this piece of equipment doesn't sit outside, right? But we have a significant number of pieces of equipment that do sit outside. And we're going through a facility rationalization approach right now. So that's why we need to know whether we're going to keep this piece of equipment or not, because it means are we going to actually have to make a recommendation to council potentially to expand our overall, operations bays by one extra bay in order to make sure that we keep this piece of equipment around. So it's not an operational impact, it's that $150,000 for another garage bay. That's what we're trying to understand, whether there's any overall cost savings.
Okay, Councillor Bartley.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Darcy, did we just not buy a building that we're going to use for a parking lot in the future we could store some equipment in?
Through your worship, the intention is to use that building in the short term for Rob's group of people and within environmental services, because the building that they're currently in right now has been sold to an independent third party. So we had to pay lease costs on that. This one will come lease free, at least for a short period of time. And certainly it's not really conducive to a large number of pieces of equipment being in it for any length of time.
Anything further? I'll call the question then. All in favor of this report coming forward as presented? One, 2, 3, 4. That is, and those against? 2. That's carried. Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to updates from members appointed to County Council committees and local boards. Bogner Hall is off first. Mr. Bartley.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I missed the last Bogner board meeting. I had another prior engagement. They moved their meeting because of the storm, which didn't allow me to go to the meeting, but I'll have a report next time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And Tony's dived under the desk, so we'll wait for him to resurface.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. The BIA had a meeting on April the 17th. Sort of fairly quickly, there was a great discussion about forming a banner subcommittee. So we see downtown the different banners. They need to have a group, so they were talking about that, and we have 2 people who are going to take the lead on things relating to banners. Also discussion was made about the clock downtown at the Bank of Montreal. The word that I was listening to is that the Bank of Montreal may or may not want to carry on doing that, so the BIA was looking at doing a replacement clock, double-face clock. So I think that was kind of early on in some conversation. About the boxes downtown for the trees, questions were simply raised on that about who pays for them, what type of box they wear, how durable they wear, and a bunch of other minor questions sort of about the process of putting these boxes downtown. And they noted that they didn't seem to think that there was a whole lot happening in the months of July and August down at the harbor.
Okay. I heard that we were looking at apple boxes for the trees on the streets.
Through your worship,
Very
we're looking at that as a baseline suggestion. We actually have gone out to the public. There is a separate page on the web. We have a survey, comment cards, everything else on this. This was the best solution that we as staff could come up with, and we certainly think that it's absolutely viable, and it kind of partakes in part of the Meaford heritage with the apple bin look. But we are asking the public that if they've got better ideas to let us know, because we're certainly open to anything better than what we could come up with.
Okay. Sounded pretty appropriate to me. Okay, and Tony, back to you for Community Policing Committee.
Thank you.
Speak
Thank you
to
again,
it briefly.
Madam Mayor. So it was our first meeting on Wednesday, April the 24th. All the members that wanted to serve on that committee were present. The inspector himself was there. We had both of our clerks, and thank you, Madam Mayor, for attending that first sit-around also. And as I mentioned to Inspector Murray when he gave his presentation, I do believe that this is going to be a very good and positive group to make comments to our inspector on the OPP and the delivering of what they do for us in our municipality.
Thank you. Good, it was good discussion. Meaford Public Library, who's going to take that one?
If I can, I'll start anyway. The library board is working on an after 5 type of presentation where they would like to host the Chamber of Commerce and the BIA and other business people in urban Meaford. And it'll be a presentation on the benefits of the new library and also on efforts to promote business in Meaford this summer with the construction at the bridge and at the new library.
Okay, thank you. Any date for that? Not yet. Stay tuned. Councillor Greenfield.
Just in addition to the library board meeting, of course, we received rather negative news from the province concerning interlibrary loans, which are going to be eliminated, the monies for that, and there is surprising interest and use of that service at our Meaford Public Library. And the other news, of course, is that the funding for Southern Ontario Library Services, they're talking 50% cut on it too, perhaps. So, very disturbing news for the library world. On the only good news, or one of the points of good news, is that I understand the fundraising is now nicely over 400,000 and growing.
That is good news. Thank you for that. County Council, Deputy Mayor.
Your Worship, thank you. An excellent meeting as always at the county. We heard about a very comprehensive regional agricultural BRNE report from Philly Markowitz. That was jointly with Grey and Bruce counties. The county is applying for a project from the Investing in Canada Infrastructure Program, the rural funding stream, to put a roundabout at the juncture of County Roads 3 and 4. We spoke to this last time, I believe, but the county is undertaking a climate change action plan that I think we in Meaford should pay attention to. Our own Mayor Klumpus was appointed third alternate to act in place of the warden during any emergency situation. And I think those were the highlights, Your Worship, unless I missed anything.
No, we covered that pretty well. So now we move on to anything else from, Councillor Vickers.
I was just wondering, the county, rolled back some of the tax rate increase on the agriculture lands. Is there anything more to be added to that, or?
We spoke to that, I believe, Councillor Vickers, at our last council meeting, but yes, the county did agree to roll back from 25 to 24 in relation to the agricultural assessment tax ratio, yes.
And if I may, just that the Heritage Committee will hold its first meeting here on Wednesday at 4 p.m. in the council chambers.
That's right, Councillor. Deputy Mayor.
Your Worship, if I may add, the Tourism Committee met at County, and I just wanted to share one piece of information from that. Andrew Sigward, who presented to this council the Southern Georgian Bay Workforce Task Force Attainable Housing Strategy a few months ago, provided an update, and the good news is that the town of Blue Mountains has created an Attainable Housing Corporation. They've retained a consultant to identify their first project, which they intend to have out in an RFP process soon, and they hope to be in the development stage by the end of this year. So good for them for moving ahead so quickly.
Okay. Good news. Yes. Sorry. It's okay.
You go ahead, Paul. Thank you, I think. Great Salvo Conservation Authority last Wednesday afternoon. Quite a lengthy meeting, as becoming the custom. We also had a Source Protection Authority meeting after Grace Office extended it. Again, bad news from the province. Our poultry allowance of $75,000, which has been basically in effect since 1995, for flood management and control monitoring has been cut to $37,000. And I think maybe even more, or as devastating as the 50 million tree program is being cut. And for many, many years, Grace Harbor Conservation Authority was the leader across Ontario in basically in tree planting. And what that did was, as well as plant a lot of trees, it also brought a lot of money into our forestry program, which ended up quite often going into reserves to help with the overall Grace Harbor budget. So I think Mr. Smith's going to bring a formal report on the potential repercussions to the conservation authorities. So yeah, some trying times ahead, I'm afraid.
Unfortunate.
So they're looking for support in media attention on their flood management control, and I think they're going to be asking municipalities to maybe up what they're allowing to or willing to give to the conservation authority. You know, just a question: we got the Big Head River there. Do we as a municipality of Meaford find that information valuable, and be willing to pay an added cost to have that information? Not to put you on the spot or anything, Rob.
Through your worship, we would need to review that impact. I couldn't speak to it directly, but we do monitor the flood information that is provided to us. We typically don't have, it does affect some roads that we do monitor, but we need to evaluate that.
Because I know they'll be looking, they're looking for support, right? So so if you do think they're valuable and they're worth keeping, then the municipality may want to you know, form an opinion and have a little bit of say on what might happen to it.
Through you, Madam Mayor, the Grace Harbor Conservation Board has written to the municipality asking for the municipality to pass a resolution of support and to send a letter to the province about the importance of these programmes. That letter will be on the next agenda of council, as it only arrived on a couple of days ago, and you'll have the opportunity to pass that motion should you so wish. If the funding continues, then Grace Harbor will have to ask us more formally for if they want more of a contribution, and then we'd make a decision at that stage.
Okay, thank you for that. We'll keep our eyes open for that when the next letter comes.
Through your worship, just also to note to council that recently staff have also been asked by way of email to provide testimonials or support based on our use of this information so that it can be included in GSCA presentations as well. So we'll review that and provide something back to the Conservation Authority.
Perfect, thank you. How did the tree sale go?
Surprisingly very well. We're very busy in spite of the snow.
Yeah.
But no,
That was good news.
We were quite satisfied. A lot of people came out.
Good.
It's good.
Good to hear. Okay, anything else? I think that covers all the boards and committees, and we'll move into council directions for Q1. I guess it's different on the other one. Well, I've got building report first. On my copy, it's the other way around. So we'll go with the building report first. Yes?
Thank you, Your Worship. I just happen to have the building report on my screen here, and you look at that. Very good news. Very good news. Over $6 million in permits already this year. 5 new homes, renovations of $900,000 of permits. Some very strong numbers. A year ago, we were just under $5.5 million. So. This is a very steady pace and a very good pace, and I'm sure it's going to continue and likely pick up when and if the spring ever comes.
Of course, thanks for that, Harley. If spring ever comes. Council directions. Anything on there that folks want to bring up or query? If not, we'll receive as, yes, Councillor Kentner.
I just wondered if there's any progress on the water issue. That's, I mean, this is only just...
Usage of water?
Yes. You probably haven't had time to do anything about it, but I just wondered if it is something you're planning to have a meeting with the bulk carriers.
It's showing that that will come to council in Q3 2019. So,
Yeah,
Rob, do you have
I
something
have
to...
met with the water staff, and they are making the arrangements to meet with the bulk water providers, so they have that in progress, but it's part of the bigger picture that will come later.
Okay. All right, will be received then, and that I need a motion then to move out of committee of the whole. Councillor Bartley, Councillor Bell, all in favor? And that is carried. And any notices of motion coming forward? Councillor Kentner.
I will bring give you a notice now that I'll bring a motion to the next meeting to direct our communications officer to be in charge of sound for our public meetings, and that our mayor or CAO will be tasked with moderating such meetings so that technical staff don't have to play referee as well as, provide factual information at a public meeting.
Okay, that'll then come forward at the next meeting. Thank you. Anything else?
I do have one here from Shirley, and she was suggesting this would come up under F in communications, but it is notice of a motion and I'm sure that you'll be hearing this for the first time, that Council of the Municipality accept the donation of a projector and screen for the Meaford Hall Terrace Room from the Meaford Rotary Club, and that Council directs staff to charge $500 per year for the full use of the terrace room kitchen, including cleanup fees for the duration of the 5-year contract with the Meaford Rotary Club, and that Council waive the Meaford Hall Board room fee 5 times per year for the duration of the 5-year contract with the Meaford Rotary Club. So that's...
This is a motion coming forward.
It's notice of a
next
motion,
time.
yes.
Okay.
Through your worship, I think that's not intended to be a notice of motion, but related to item F on the communications section, and,
Right.
and as it's about a communications item, it can be done today.
Okay. All right, thank you. We'll pull that. That's it for notice of motion, and then we'll move into the adoption of the minutes, council meeting April the 8th, and mover and a seconder for that, please. Okay. Councillor Kentner, Councillor Bartley. Any comments, questions? Councillor Bell.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I draw attention to item 8B, April the 8th. It is on the purchasing of goods and services. I declare conflict of interest, and I am listed as seconding something from Councillor Vickers right in the middle of it. He is out of the room.
Duly noted. Thanks for that. Anything else? Okay, all in favor of accepting these minutes? And that is carried. And the closed meeting of April the 8th. Mover and a seconder for that, please. Councillor Bartley and Councillor Greenfield. All in favor of accepting those minutes? And that is carried. Moving into communications then. I'm assuming from the note that you've just read that you'll want to pull item F. I think it's the same one on the revised meeting here. Anything else that needs to come forward? No, seeing nothing else, then we'll have a look at that letter and look for comments. Mr. Smith?
Through you, Madam Mayor, just as a little bit of background, the Meaford Rotary Club came and met with staff some months ago now, back in 2018, about the cost of using the Meaford Hall facility. That conversation and a number of others prompted our review of the fees and charges for Meaford Hall, which Council will remember they adopted a couple of weeks ago, with some fairly significant changes for community groups. Since then, the Rotary Club have suggested that they would like to donate a projector and a screen for the terrace room at Meaford Hall, which is something that staff would like to have and will be of benefit to groups using that room, but it is not currently in the capital plan. The Rotary Club have suggested that if they are to donate that, they would like something in return, which is a further discount for the fees and charges that equates to around about $600 a year for their 5-year contract. Staff are in a position to be able to recommend